Councilman Smith on. Okay. I would like to welcome all of you out today to our Harriman City Council meeting for Wednesday, July 14th, 2021. We will get started. Just want to make sure everyone is aware that we do have Councilman Clint Smith, who is with us digitally, so from time to time you'll hear his voice over the speakers above you. We will go ahead and get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. That will be led for us by Austin Watson. Austin, if you come up to the podium for us, please.
This conference will now be recorded.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Austin. We appreciate your participation with us this evening. We will move on to City Council comments and recognitions. I would like, before we get started, however, to give our new city manager an opportunity to introduce himself. So, Nathan, if you want to take just a moment and introduce yourself to the public.
Welcome. I'm sure you're not here for me today. I think it has something more to do with rugby for most of you, but Nathan Cherpesky, excited to be here. I've been a city manager for more than 15 years and in public service for a little over 21. Excited to be in Harriman. I have my wife and son with me here tonight. One of my children, I have 5, and so glad that he's actually home on leave from West Point, so it's nice to have him here right at the moment. But excited to be here and look forward to working with you. And if you need something, you can call me. I recognize I work for the citizens of this town, so thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate that. Council members, comments and recognitions. I would just like to make a quick comment for those who may be in attendance or watching this online, that while you may be receiving notices in regards to taxing changes here in the city, those taxing changes are very specific to our fire district and making sure that we are funding our fire department correctly. Your overall tax rate is not increasing. We are just simply reallocating where they go so that we, until we can form our fire district next year. If you have questions about that, the city has on their website quite a bit of information, and we'd be happy to help you understand what those are. So there's no misclarifications. We're not raising your taxes.
Your taxes are not going up.
Yeah, your taxes are not going up.
Well, not by us.
By
Not by
us, yes, that's true. Harriman City is not increasing your taxes in any way.
We can't speak for other entities.
So, but if you have questions on that, we have plenty of information on our city website, or feel free to come and reach out to any of us as city council members, and we'll do our best to help make sure you understand the specifics of that process.
Mr. Mayor, if I might, just one quick sec. A huge round of applause, a shout out to the Harriman Arts Council's production of Newsies. If you have not had a chance to go over and see that, you are missing out. It is absolutely fantastic. I am just amazed at the quality of the production, the music, the performances. It really is, for community theater, I don't think I've ever seen a better presentation. So if you have an opportunity, go over and check it out. Good job, guys.
Yeah, that was on my list of things to talk about, so I completely agree. The other thing I would like to talk about, I'd just like to send a shout out and a congratulations to a local resident that we have that will be competing in the Olympics. Ryan White will be, she will be competing in swimming for the United States Olympic team in Tokyo. So extremely proud of all of our residents whenever they have such an accomplishment that brings them national and international recognition. We've got some people here today we're going to talk about here in a little bit that we're just as proud of, but we would encourage all of our residents to support the other residents in our community when they take such a massive step in their career and have such a wonderful opportunity to go and represent our country in the Olympics. So I want to make sure we called Ryan out for that and wish Ryan all of the best in those endeavors. If there aren't any further comments or recognitions, we will move on to the public.
Mr. Mayor,
Oh, please go ahead, Clint. Thank you.
yeah, I just In the vein of recognizing, obviously, our Arts Council, I think this is really the first opportunity we've had to really thank our event staff for all of their hard work through the Fort Harriman Days. It was awesome to be back out, to be part of that with our community. It's no small task to pull off the coordination of those events, but just really a huge appreciation to our staff for all the hard work in such a successful event.
Thank you. Any others?
You guys hit all the ones I had on my list.
One last recognition now I'm thinking about it. We just had an entire conversation about water conservation in the city. And I'd like to express appreciation to our residents for the amount of water they've been conserving. We're seeing a substantial decrease in the amount of water being used by residents this year over last year. And we appreciate those efforts as we are sitting in a drought. One of the entities I'd like to call out is our school district. They had a substantial drop in the amount of water that they've used over this year over last year. We appreciate them being such a good partner in working with us to make sure that we have that water conservation.
Mayor, I would just like to add, and I know this is at the end of our agenda, but just in reference to your first, about the taxes, that hearing is August 4th, so if anybody's confused about what the taxes are or what the purpose is or anything about that, just be here August 4th. All that would be explained because we have to go through a truth and taxation process, so that's the place to come to get the clarification on. Absolutely. To understand that we're not raising taxes, but to understand why it looks like we are.
Awesome. All right, we will go ahead and move on to the public comment portion of our meeting. Audience members may bring any item to the City Council's attention. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes. State law prohibits the council from acting on items that do not appear on the agenda. Public comments for this meeting will also be conducted electronically. Any person interested in addressing the council may submit a comment by emailing recorder@harriman.org or by visiting harriman.org/agenda-and-minutes. Where there is a link to fill out an online public comment form, and your statement would then be read into the public record. So if we will open the public comment portion at this time. If you'd like to make a comment, please come to the podium and state your name for us. All right, seeing none, I will turn to staff to see if we have any electronic. Seeing none, I will close the public comment portion of our meeting. We will move on to item 8, which is the City Council Board and Committee reports.
I'll go. I just got here late from attending the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District Board. A lot of that's already been talked about today about water conservation. The hard thing is it takes a drought for anybody to really pay much attention to water. And unfortunately, what that means is sometimes habits change right back to what they were before. So I would encourage you to continue. Jordan Valley Water is where we get a lot of our water for Harriman. Some of it we get from wells that are here in the city, but a lot of any of our contracted water is for Jordan Valley. And really they're becoming a leader in water conservation and the programs that they have established for water conservation. Our conservation gardens, our Flip Your Strip programs, all these kind of landscape grants and assistant programs that they have really hadn't been offered by anyone else. Now, some of the other districts are jumping on board and getting money allocated to maybe offer that same type of thing, but really they've been a leader in that. And the reason I say that is because those kind of permanent things are what help us in the long run. I'm going to pound the pulpit on this every time because we hear a lot of complaints, and probably well-deserved a lot of times, about the transportation problems that we encounter. And it's because we drive to work or we drive to an activity, and it's like, it's a headache to be constantly stopped in traffic or to be on roads that you feel like your car's going to shake apart. But so we hear a squeaky wheel on that a lot, all the way up to the legislature. So this year we were fortunate in getting more money allocated for that, for transportation. But I'm telling you that the infrastructure that should get the most focus and gets the least is water. Because you all would rather turn on your tap or flush your toilets. You drive on a bumpy road all day. If the one is more important than the other, you don't live without water. And we are doing a really good job of growing houses in this state, but we're not producing any more water because we can't. We're seeing the levels in the Great Salt Lake lowest ever. Is that a big deal? Well, let me think about the lake effect. You all know about the lake effect. Sometimes in Harriman, we feel the lake effect, right? We get a lot of extra snow because they'll say the lake effect. Well, that lake effect is also what makes us have the greatest snow on Earth, okay? That Great Salt Lake is a huge part of that. But the Great Salt Lake doesn't get water if we use it all up before it reaches there. And if we don't get good snowstorms, guess what? We don't have water to facilitate the houses that we're building and the residents that are coming here. So we have to do a better job of water conservation. We'll never meet our usage needs in this state if we don't reduce our water use. The goal is 25% reduction. So it's great. I really appreciate what the mayor said about thank everybody for reducing, but it has to be more than just in a drought year. Habits have to change. So if you have park strips, flip them. Be done with the turf in them. The city needs to do a better job too. I've asked for that too, and we're working on that to look at all our unnecessary turf areas in our city and get rid of it, because if it costs us the same amount to do weeds in those areas, it's money well spent versus trying to put water on them. So I just would ask you to always look at your water usage and see where you can conserve, not just in a drought year, but making permanent changes that will have a greater long-term impact on the state and the necessary purposes of water. Now, I told you that Harriman City is not increasing your taxes, but the Jordan Valley Water District is. So there is a proposed tax increase for the district. That truth and taxation hearing will be August 11th at 6 p.m. at the district offices. That address is 8215 South, 1300 West. So if any of you have anything you want to say about that or talk about that, please come to that meeting, again, August 11th at 6 p.m. at the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District offices. And then past that, now that I've ranted on that, Youth Council, that's another opportunity I have to sit on with the Youth Council. We had, and I'm going to be embarrassed, the number changed a little bit. Around 25 kids signed up for Youth Council this year. We're just going through the process of finishing up the interviews on that. Just super grateful for the quality of youth that are in our community and these kids that just want to serve. There's not one interview that I go through that they're not talking about. They're here because they want to serve and give back to their community. And at 15 to 18 years old, that's really an impressive thing, that's really what they want to do, is to give back to the community. So thank you. Thank you for raising great kids and for the kids who want to, I shouldn't say kids, youth who want to participate in that. I really appreciate that. And that's all I have to say for now.
If you can't tell, Sherry cares about water.
Well,
And
we all better.
And we very much appreciate those efforts because it's very important, and I completely agree with what you were saying, and thank you for your efforts on that.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, please.
quick update, if I may. Last week, Transcom held a meeting. The purpose of that meeting was to amend the 2021-2026 Transportation Improvement Plan. That was because there was additional funding identified to add a couple of additional projects into that 2021-2026 improvement plan, and more specifically, really for immediate launch of those projects. These are two projects. There's two of the three projects that were approved by Transcom during that amended plan that will have really some direct impact on Harriman in those transportation dollars coming. The first project that was approved that directly will affect our community is SR 111. That's from Harriman Parkway to 118th South. We've heard a little bit of talk about this and the realignment. So this project will construct a new 2-lane road with shelter, multi-use trails, and an intersection in 118th South. And it will also secure, and this is really a key part of this, it will secure 150-foot right-of-way for future widening of this section of road. And that new project has been added and approved at a cost of $50 million. So that's good as we look at, again, traffic and transportation improvements to our area. The second one on the list of three that was approved has to do with Mountain View Corridor, better known as SR 85. And this is the extension of Porter Rockwell to 2100 North in Utah County. So this project will construct a new facility that connects the current road, SR 73, from Salt Lake to Utah counties. It will help reduce congestion, obviously, on Redwood Road and I-15 around the point of the mountain by providing an alternate freeway connection for traffic traveling between the two counties. That project was approved at a price tag of $350,600,000. So again, two significant projects that were added for really immediate use. The anticipated year is listed as 2021, so they have plans to start both of these projects immediately. Again, good news is we've continued to work with our state legislators on transportation infrastructure in the Southwest Quadrant. I think that this is another indicator that we've been successful in working together with them, identifying the needs that we have in the Southwest Quadrant, and happy to be part of Transcom to be able to help continue to move these projects forward to benefit our community. So that's my report.
Thank you, Councilman Smith. And I think many of us are very excited to hear those projects have now been approved and funded and move forward. And I think it's going to help our residents, particularly Mountain View Corridor, is going to help our residents not only in traffic and commuting, but it's also going to promote economic development in our community by increasing the traffic flows, which means more taxes we generate through sales tax and less taxes our residents have to pay to help facilitate our city. So fantastic news. We will move on. Go ahead.
Just
Yeah,
couple quick
please.
reports. So my new favorite word is Culex tarsalis. Sherry laughs because that is the breed of mosquito that carries a West Nile virus. A lot of people think that because we're receiving less rain, that mosquitoes aren't breeding as well. And overall, that's true. But for Culex tarsalis, they are in abundance right now, and they're spreading. So there have been some tests in the South Salt Lake District that have a couple of pools have come back with some positive tests for West Nile virus, and there is one questionable case hasn't been 100% verified of West Nile virus in human case so far in the county. We anticipate those numbers will go up if people aren't careful. So when you're out and about, keep the bug spray on with the DEET. Stay away if you see standing water anywhere, any open puddles or old tires or pools or anything like that. Dump the water out, keep them clean. But the Mosquito Abatement District's doing a good job trying to stay on top of that. So one other report from the Association of Municipal Councils. We had a really cool conversation yesterday with Natalie Goschnauer, the head of the Gardner Institute up at the U, chief economist up there. She had some really interesting statistics, but a couple of key points was that the Utah economy is doing fantastic compared to all the other 50 states. And over the last decade, with the preliminary census numbers they've come out, that Utah is the fastest growing state in the country over the past 10 years. What's interesting is about 2/3 of that growth has come from our own population having babies. About 1/3 of that is from net migration. So that conversation turned into a really long conversation about housing and housing affordability. But for the first time in any meeting I've been in, I actually heard an economist talk about the importance of building all housing types to increase affordability, not just one kind of housing. And it was really great to hear that validation from the chief economist and head at the Gardner Institute. I don't know that that's being touted enough, but it was still great to hear it. So thought I'd pass that on.
Just since we actually have an audience tonight, I would, tell me if I'm wrong, but at least for me, what we have been pounding the pavement on is we need more single-family homes. All the builders want to build is multifamily homes to try to solve this affordability problem. But when you do that and you have no supply of what the main demand is, you raise the cost of everything. So to have an economist say, basically agree with that is actually, it shouldn't be, but it is a big step forward in the narrative on the political front.
In this conversation, it's the economist, not just a economist. It was great news. So, thank you.
All right, we will move on to our next item, which is 9.1, and it will be the oath of office ceremony for our city manager, Nathan Trapesky. And so I will turn the time over to our city recorder. Nathan, we're going to have you stand here. We're going to invite your family up to take a quick picture, and then we're going to come take a picture with you real quick. So go ahead and let's invite your family up.
Want us out of the...
Let's get out of this one, and then we'll take a picture.
Been working for 2 weeks, but we thought we'd be efficient.
All right, thank you very much. We look forward to working with you, Nathan, and looking forward to the direction the city's facing, so thank you very much. We will move on to item 9.2, which is the UMCA Certified Municipal Clerk presentation, and we're going to turn the time over to Ms. Sloan.
Thank you, Mayor. If, with your permission, I'd like to ask Wendy Thorpe and her family to come up.
Please. Oh yeah, your family gets to come up too.
You guys all look as nervous as I do. Thank you. Mayor and Council, thank you for the opportunity and your time tonight to recognize Wendy Thorpe. My name is Tangi Sloan, and I represent the Utah Municipal Clerks Association and our partnership with the International Institute of Municipal Clerks. The mission of our organization is to provide our members with educational and network support to promote positive professional interaction with the elected officials, staff, and the general public, and to enhance the awareness and value of the municipal clerk recorder profession. Our international organization offers 2 certification programs. These programs are administered locally here in Utah by the Utah Municipal Clerks Association, and we have developed an amazing partnership with Southern Utah University to provide educational opportunities for these programs. Wendy has completed the requirements to obtain a certified municipal clerk designation. To obtain this, she has had to actively be working with a municipality, performing the duties of a clerk recorder, complete university-level coursework, earning a minimum of 60 educational points and 50 points related to her work experience. 1 point is received for every 2 hours of class time, and 60 points reflects 120 hours of class time. It's a lot of work. As you can imagine, it takes many years to attain this certification. We are fortunate that Wendy, Mayor, Council, and City Manager recognize improving their employee skills and knowledge through continuing education, professional development opportunities. We salute you and your city for your forward thinking. It is our privilege to honor Wendy Thorpe with this award tonight, recognizing her professional accomplishments. Congratulations. Jackie, did you want to come up and say anything?
Oh, yeah. Oh, we're getting one. Oh, yeah.
Council and Mayor, did you want to come down? And
We
have
are
a
absolutely
photo
going to come down. We would love to get a picture real quick because Wendy is a valued member of our team.
All right, 1, 2, 3. All right.
I do want to take a second and thank Wendy for all of her hard work and dedication to the recorder profession, how professional she can help the planning commission meetings, and in my absence, she is a great asset to Harriman City in helping with cemetery records, our city records, and she's an awesome team member to work with.
Absolutely. Wendy, you are a valued member of our community. We very much appreciate what you do for us. So thank you. All right, we will move on to our next item, which is recognition of the 2021 Fort Harriman Town Days Grand Marshal, J. Bryant Miller, who is on his way up. Anthony.
All right. It is a supreme honor and a privilege for me to stand up here with J. Bryant Miller and recognize him as our 2021 Fort Harriman Town Days Grand Marshal. I hope everybody got a chance to see his gloves that he was wearing as Grand Marshal. Awesome. They had a leather fringe and some intricate beadwork on them. If I'm recalling right, those were your father's gloves passed down to you?
Yeah, they're about 125 years.
About 125 years old. You can you could see they've been stitched and repaired and taken care of over the years, and I'm sure that he'll be passing those down to his posterity. But it was pretty cool to see him waving out of that vehicle with those gloves. So. J. Bryant Miller is a lifelong resident of Harriman City. Pretty much live on the same block down there in Old Town his whole life, correct? He's spent his life serving the community in many different capacities. He's been a volunteer fire chief. He's worked on the Harriman Pipeline. He's been an integral part, or was an integral part of the Harriman Association for many years. And he worked also as a sexton and groundskeeper in the Harriman Cemetery. And that's where I first got to meet J. Bryant, was down in the cemetery, as I used to work for the streets department, who used to do the burials down there with him. And I've never seen a I've never seen anybody operate a backhoe like he could. He could whip those graves out, dig those faster and better than cleaner than anybody I've ever seen to date. So he had a lot of practice over the years of doing that. Also, there in the cemetery, he started the veteran memorial flags that we put up every Memorial Day along with the plaques. I believe he started that back in 1992, and it started out with about 35 flags and plaques. And we currently have 155, 155 flags and plaques for each veteran that is buried there in the Harriman Cemetery. Jay Bryan also worked for the city for a number of years. Started when it first incorporated, and he retired at the age of 85, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? About that. Yeah, close enough. So I'd like to present Jay Bryant with this plaque to commemorate him as Grand Marshal, and also to thank him for his many, many years of service here within the community. He's done so much for our community and been such an integral part of the city itself and the surrounding community. So thank you, Jay Bryant, for all your service, and thank you for representing us as Grand Marshal.
Jay Bryan, if you'd like to say anything.
What the hell you clapping for? Can I go sit down?
Only if we can take a picture
I
first.
can't, I got to say something negative. I can't get past that, so the acoustic in here is horrible. I haven't heard a word you said. Of course, I'm deaf, but other than that, no problem. I appreciate all the work you people do. I've been there. I've been there and done that, I guess you could say. It's like the new coming in and the old going out. This outfit's been on hundreds of parades. And I've wore this and them gloves he talked about in all those parades, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. And I'd still be doing it if I could still walk. And if I could still get on the wagon, I'd still be doing it, but I can't do it, so I've had to give up. And I sold the team and wagon to the Harriman City, and they forgot to come and get the team, and I fed them for another 5 years before they died. Other than that, everything is fine, and I appreciate what everybody's doing and what you've done, and thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Jay Bryant. We would love to take a picture with you if that'd be okay.
You what?
Can we take a picture with you?
Can we do a picture?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
I won't hold that against any of you to have a picture with me. If you think it's safe. Huh?
Is it okay if we do it right here?
You betcha. If you think it's safe.
Hold that.
I think that's your determination, not ours.
Or it may, okay. Come in here. Sure, get the beauty here next to me. Is your cameras all right? No problem. Thank you.
Brian, can I shake your hand?
Thank you.
Thank you. Very nice to meet you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to make a quick request of the council, and I think we'll need a quick motion on this to slightly rearrange our agenda to move 9.4 back to after 9.6. If I could get a motion from the council.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we're just going to move that one item back just a couple so we can continue with the wonderful enjoyment that we've had so far. So we're going to move on to item 9.5 real quick, which is approval of a resolution reappointing a planning commission member. Michael, we moved you up. Sorry.
Just for the rugby team, I've facetiously said that we should put things like theirs at the end of agendas so we have an audience, and somebody listened to me this time, so I apologize.
So as we presented to you at our last meeting during the work session, we have a member of our planning commission who needs to be reappointed. And Adam Jacobson has been our longest serving commissioner. So we have prepared a resolution for your consideration to reappoint him to a 3-year term. Regular commissioners serve for 3 years. We have 7 commissioners and then 3 alternates. So we have all positions currently filled pending this reappointment consideration tonight.
Okay, any questions by the council? I'll accept a motion. Is he here?
No.
Okay.
Motion to approve Resolution R15-2021, appointing Adam Jacobson as a member of the Harriman City Planning Commission.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes, that motion passes.
Thank
so
you.
we congratulate him. We'll move on to item 9.6, which is the recognition of the Harriman Rugby National Championship. Ooh, I like the way that sounds. Steve?
Okay, so I'm really excited about this part. I bet you these guys are excited about this part because then they get to go home if they want to, so. So I asked for a little information just about the history of the club and how things have kind of developed, and I had to reread it like 3 times because I just couldn't believe this was all the same club, the same team. It's seriously, it's like something out of a Disney movie, guys. This is like incredible. And I went through and I kind of rearranged a few things in the notes and put some things together, and it's still like 3 pages long. So I don't want to leave any important information out, but I'm going to rush through some of the good stuff here. So the rugby program started in 2011. Football head coach at Harriman said he wouldn't come on board unless they hired a rugby coach and started a rugby team. And so they did. And then in 2012, they went out and won the state championship, which I thought was pretty awesome. In 2013, they went to their first nationals appearance and finished 2nd in the nation. The team has finished the season ranked in the top 5 nationally every season from 2012 through this last season, 2021. In 2018 and 2019, the team finished 2nd in the national championship game by less than 5 points in each game. In 2020, the season was canceled, but Harriman was ranked number 1 at the time of the cancellation. They've had 7 Utah State championships in 15s, 5 Utah State championships in 7s, 27 All-American players, over 100 Utah All-Star selections, over 50 collegiate athletes have come through the program, 3 current NFL players, 6 current players invited to the USA All-American camp. 2 former coaches are now running the program at BYU, which is a perennial title contender. And our former head coach, our current attack coach, along with one of the girls rugby alum team, are running the Utah Warriors High School Academy All-Star team. That seems like a pretty great resume for the team coming into this season and what happened. But there's one thing in here that I really wanted to highlight that I think speaks to part of the foundation of the success of this group. And that is that they are active in community service, including donation collections for the Children's Hospital and Alzheimer's patients, volunteering yearly at Eastlake Elementary Community Fair, raising over $1,000 for children's cancer research. So regardless of their athletic accomplishments on the field, what they're doing off the field is turning them into great young men. The 2021 season involved overcoming some challenges. First of all, with last season's cancellation, they only had 2 returning players with varsity experience. And they started out a little slower than usual. Players were learning the game, finding their footing. A quote from the coach says, "This is the biggest improvement I have ever seen in one team in a single season." He attributes that to their work ethic and the leadership of these young men. I guess the coaches probably did a fair job there too. They had a trailer with over 10 years of equipment that was stolen. Thanks to the HPD, we got that recovered, we got their stuff back to them. They wouldn't have been able to continue the season without that. They were the only team at the Nationals without a home field of their own. They have to pay to rent another school field at pretty significant expense to the team. They were the only team at the Nationals without an operating budget. Some pretty substantial financial challenges, as there's some families that have some economic struggles at home. The team had to practice after school was out, after graduation was done, for 5 weeks without a full game between the state championships and the Nationals, due to the Nationals being postponed. When they got there, they were met with triple-digit heats and high humidity, to the fact that medical staff had to keep players hydrated with electrolyte solutions and in some cases IVs. During the season, this team defeated the state championships from Arizona, New York, Connecticut, and Ohio. Many players are moving on to play college rugby or football. Some players they have offers, but they're still undecided. In the state championship, they won 56-7 over nationally ranked Olympus. It was the second biggest margin of victory in state title game history, behind the 2016 team that won 74-12 over Snow Canyon. The 9th and 10th grade team won their second state title, 38-17 over Olympus. 7th and 8th grade team won their conference title, finished 3rd in the state, and fielded 54 players this season. So the pipeline looks good. At Nationals, in the first round, they defeated 3-time national champion Xavier 45-11. In the semifinals, they won 46-14 over Staples, Connecticut. It's the only other public school that was in the tournament. And in the finals, came from behind to win 22-17 over St. Ignatius, who came in as the #1 ranked team in the country. With special acknowledgement to Director Jeff Wilson, varsity head coach Elvis Hansen, assistant coaches Zach Thorham, Mate Macchiola, Sean Harris, Ken McPeak, Ray Terrell, Tony Barker, Lucky, I'm just going to miss your last name. And the 9th and 10th grade head coach Sean McKinney, 7th and 8th grade coach CJ Dunn, and Principal Kornberg over there, I see. I would especially like to call out the 2021 captains, Mason Barker, Strider Fontaine, Daxton McPeak, Sake Tukuafu. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like to recognize the 2021 national champion Harriman Rugby team. Congratulations.
Oh, if you think we're not making you come up and get a picture, you're absolutely wrong. Come on, fellas. Come on up.
Come on, guys, you're not shy, I know that.
All right. 1, 2, 3. All right.
So as Steve comes back up here, I hear we have one more thing from the team. Oh, they just left you hanging, dude. They just all by yourself.
So, we as a team would like to present to the city a signed ball by everyone on the team that won the national championship. So,
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
That is awesome.
That is genuinely appreciated. Thank you very much. We are extremely proud of you as members of our community, and we are grateful that you were able to come, and I can't say anything more than congratulations. That is a fantastic accomplishment, and it will lead to many more fantastic accomplishments that I'm sure you will have further in your career. Take what you have and use it to grow and to build and become the wonderful young men that we already know you are and that we know you will become. Does the council members have any comments they'd like to add?
Good job.
Does this mean all those cars won't be parked in front of Daxton's house now? I can get home at night. All right. That they're always over there, but usually it's something related to the team or service projects or whatever. I don't think we've had any complaints that way. But it's been kind of fun to watch that as a neighbor a couple streets down, and I gave him a hard time as he came up. I told him that all you guys' parents are good at bragging, but Daxton's mom's probably the best at it. So congratulations, well done.
Now, I just want to ask one question. I have this right. Coaches, you guys come from a historically great rugby tradition at Highland, is that right? Yeah, great tradition there, and I can see why your young men are so good here. That's awesome. You were taught well, and
They're not so good.
Guys
They're
well.
the best. Let's
They
be
are
clear.
the best
They
in
are
the nation.
literally the best.
That is true.
And the nice thing is you have a good program even here in Harriman to feed into because the Warriors made the playoffs too. So we're glad about that.
Well, they don't care about the Warriors.
Until they get it.
Come on, Coach. Come on up and say something real quick to us. Yeah, that's right. It happened. We left one of the players hanging. We're gonna pull you up too. Uh-oh. He's gonna get emotional. This is one of those moments where the coach gets to get emotional.
These guys give me a hard time because they all think I like to talk. I don't. I just have to talk sometimes because things need to be said. But thank you so much. We're so honored to be here. So honored to get the invite. Since we started this thing, we have felt nothing but love and support from Harriman City, from this community. That 10 years ago. Most people didn't know if a rugby ball was pumped or stuffed, and you always say it's great job security because no one knows enough about rugby to really criticize you a whole lot. So yeah, we meant to do that. Sure, yeah. But the amount of support has been incredible. The life of a club sport is sometimes a difficult one in terms of. The rules at the district level, what kind of support you cannot receive. I can't say enough about Harriman High School support and Mr. Q in particular, who is not required to support us to the level he does, and he does it because if you know him, you know he cares about these kids so deeply, and he has their back every way, shape, and form he can. And he has been so wonderful to support us. But But this community, it has been absolutely incredible to me to see. Again, we've felt so loved and so honored to be part of this community. These young men are incredible young men. I am excited to see them become wonderful members of this community as well. Rugby is a neat sport because there is very little as a coach that you do during the game. You do most of your coaching during practice, but out in the game, we make subs, but we might yell some things from the sideline and they ignore us a lot of the time. And but out in the field, it's up to them. If things go poorly, we can't call a timeout. We can't gather everybody and so forth. They have to figure it out together with each other. And this is a very, very close group of young men who loves each other very much, and
Because they all seem to live at Daxton's house.
there is a lot of team bonding that happens at Daxton's house, at Strider's house, right across the street, at the Barker house. That is kind of the secret weapon. They hang out a lot, and the amount of food they go through is unbelievable. Doesn't always smell good either. But what I love about this game is that because they're out there on the field and they have to succeed or fail on their own, and they have to do that together, they grow up very fast and they develop leadership skills. And this group in particular is a group that understands that they can dream big dreams and they can achieve them, that they're not impossible. That they understand the pathway to great success, and that we need more people like that in the world. We need more people like that in our communities, and so they are going to do wonderful things in this community because they are really a special, special group of young men. So it is very much an honor to be associated with these young men, our coaches who are all volunteers, who give their time and care about these boys and do such a wonderful job. But once again, we could not do this, get to this point, achieve these successes without the support of Harriman City and our community for 10 years and hopefully many more years to come. So thank you so very much. We appreciate it.
With the consent of this council, I am going to ask staff to find a way to display this wonderful item of history for our community here at City Hall, along with the picture of the team, so that we can make sure that our community knows the efforts that our young men have gone to, and make sure that we honor those efforts. And we appreciate all that you are, and we look forward to seeing what you guys will become. Congratulations, guys. Good job. All right, you have to stay for the next 12 hours.
The most amazing thing is we even got Brent Adams in the sideline.
Wow. All right, anything else to talk about these guys? We got all the fun stuff done now. Now we have to go to real work. All right, we will then move back to item 9.4, which was the Southwest Salt Lake County Transportation Solution Development Study Analysis. Megan Townsend, she is the Community and Economic Development Director for Wasatch Front Regional Council. Once again, gentlemen, good job. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, Nathan, we weren't here for rugby, but we are now. It'll be all right. Except for it's on the wrong side.
I apologize, Megan. I just saw your email asking me if
That's
there's
okay.
anything specific. No, I actually asked that Tammy reach out to you and get you to come give this presentation, because I don't think everybody has seen it.
Yeah,
So
perfect. And we'll have a little time, hopefully, for any questions and discussion. So,
We know you're going to do such a good job that there will be no questions.
okay. Let's just get this working. If I try to multitask, we'll be here all night. Up. Okay, so thank you for having us. I'm Megan Townsend. I'm the Community and Economic Development Director for the Wasatch Front Regional Council, the MPO for Harriman and the rest of Salt Lake County. I'm here with Natalia Brown. She's going to present with me as well. She's with Farron Pierce, our consultant on this project. So you may have heard a lot or a little about this effort. I'll do a little bit of background here, give you an overview of the process that we went through. And we want to spend most of our time this evening on the product and the next steps, the things that we can work with now. So jumping into that, this is called the Southwest Salt Lake County Transportation Analysis and Solutions Development Effort. So this project was a big team effort with all these partners you see up there on the screen. The communities included Copperton, West Jordan, South Jordan, Riverton, Bluffdale, Harriman, and unincorporated Salt Lake County. And the transportation agencies that funded and partnered together to do this were UDOT, UTA, and the Wasatch Front Regional Council. Actually, part of the funding came from a program called the Transportation and Land Use Connection Program. This is the same program that's funding your active transportation plan that I think you'll hear about either tonight or soon, but the active transportation plan that's being completed now. So this effort, a little bit of history. We began by doing the Southwest Salt Lake County Vision. You might remember the impetus of that project. It was very robust engagement, lots of conversations, and we had ups and downs along the way, and through our engagement really realized that the transportation issue was much bigger than we couldn't continue to discuss all of these things in the same lens. We needed to highlight that transportation issue, maybe pull back a little bit and do a study. So that's what we did. It's hard to study unique ideas, big ideas for transportation when we have all of these processes that we're going through really officially with other communities, other counties being considered. So that's what we did. We stepped back to fund this study.
Initially there were a lot of other growth issues mixed into the whole thing, which just kind of bogged it all down, and so we were able to really
and
just
the
focus on
transportation issue was big, so it was too much to continue to go the way we were. We did keep land use in the purview of what we were doing, though, thinking about how land use might grow and change, kind of sensitivity testing the transportation solutions we were coming up with, but focusing on transportation primarily and the solutions there. So here's the process that we went through. We kicked off early. I believe our kickoff meeting was in January. This was an expedited process. In January, we kind of summarized and made sure that we had all of the issues identified for transportation, those that came out of the visioning effort, the others that came from the stakeholder group, which was made up of mostly mayors from the community. Councilman Mayor Henderson was the representative for Harriman, representatives from the transportation agencies, et cetera. We met with staff as well. Then we came up with metrics. We weighed those metrics with the stakeholder group as well, the community leaders. And that led us to develop scenarios. So we developed 3 scenarios. I'll talk about these right here. And what I'm presenting with, by the way, is the deliverable. So you can pull this up online. You can go through it. I'll make sure you have the link. But this is the product we produced. We're going to use it to present tonight as well. These are the 3 scenarios. These were the themes. We had a connectivity focus, really looking at what would it look like if we enhanced some of the local roads. So thinking quantity of enhancements. We had a freeway focus. What would it look like if we expanded some of the major thoroughfares? So think quality. Well, maybe quality is the wrong word, but bigger instead of more. And then we had a transit focus. What would it look like if the area developed in a way that was conducive to more of a transit heavy mode share than automobile? We considered active transportation as well. We considered bikes. At this regional scale, that wasn't exactly going to solve our problem, although the more the merrier. We essentially stuck to the regional bike route that is adopted today, and I know you're working on that more now. So we took all this back to our community stakeholders. We got input from the technical committee and ultimately came up with our preferred scenario, which Natalia is going to talk about tonight. Natalia will be able to answer all the hard questions, so I'll go ahead and hand it over.
So just real quick while she's coming up, so each of these, the connectivity focus, freeway, et cetera, basically we're isolating that particular thing. So if we put all of our resources into connectivity, right, and that's what we focused on, these are all the things that we would do. If we ignored connectivity and put all of our resources into freeways, this is what it would look like, because we just don't have money for everything. So they did each of those, and then the preferred scenario is a combination of those.
Absolutely. I'll say that it was balanced with the local transportation master plans and the regional transportation plan. Those things were basically the base layer of all of these. We looked at things like if we stopped where funding is right now and didn't do any more, right, just to kind of give us a a gauge on reality, but we did keep the local transportation master plans and the regional transportation plan ingrained in the scenarios.
And this isn't a comprehensive plan that says this is how everything should be. This is kind of, and correct me if I'm using the wrong words, but more or less what we all thought could be realistic, right? Because if we tried to do all of those things, there's just no way we'll do them all. There's not enough money to go around. So looking at each of those, what are the realistic things that we think need to be, what are the core things that need to be included in this? And then the next stage is how do we get funding and work together as Southwest cities to do it? Is that something?
That is correct. So yeah, and for the freeway, just so you get an idea, we tested one long freeway connecting I-15 all the way to Mountain View Corridor, big freeway on 90th South, and pretty much nothing else because it was so expensive that you really couldn't get any other type of project other than minor connections here and there, but that was it. So that's kind of the scale that we were looking at. So the results of those three and the metrics that we kind of pulled together before led to a preferred scenario, and this we received input from all the mayors that were involved in this project, and we came up with the following. There are a couple of background tabs here that you can look at, but I think for this presentation, it's better to just go straight to the preferred scenario. This needs to load. Okay, so like Megan said, we started with the regional transportation plan. So we started with all the projects that are currently regionally planned, and then so that's what you see on the screen. We have 2 full freeways and several other widening new connections. So the purple are the full new freeways that will be that are planned, and then the orange here are widening projects for all those roads, and then the yellow are new construction, so new roads are not currently built. So that's what the current regional transportation plan, or RTP, has. Then we layered over the local transportation master plan. So we collected each community's plans, and we made our best to put them all in a map and see what's already planned. And that's what this map is showing. There are a few projects that did not make it to the preferred scenario, but I think there were 2 total between the RTP and the transportation, the local plans. So, and then we layer our new ideas. So these are things that are in no plan. These are new and need to make it through the whole planning process, which is the next step, and Megan's gonna talk about that. And one of the big ones that is pretty important for your community in particular, it's a proposed new freeway type facility on 126 between Mountain View and Bangerter. So on this preferred scenario, we knew that there is some demand, or a lot of demand, for some freeway type facility connecting Mountain View and Bangerter. Now, maybe 90th South fully from I-50 and Mountain View was too expensive and maybe not super feasible. So what's another option that we could look at? And so we thought this area would be a good spot. However, as you would imagine, it comes with a big cost. I think the estimated cost, very big, high level, it's $100 million, so very expensive. But that is the biggest, the project with the biggest impact, both in cost and also on the community as well. So this is test. This is not in any plan. This is the first step on this process. And so, well, what does that mean in terms of, and that would come with additional interchanges, of course. And by freeway type, that means that you wouldn't stop at 126. If you wanted to hop from Mountain View to Bangerter, you wouldn't have a light to hop on there. You would just go and connect. That's what a freeway facility would do in this area. So what does that mean in terms of these metrics that we were talking about? So 2 of those metrics that we looked before were the PM east-west travel time, but this is only for arterial, so we're not looking at every road, but we were looking at the bigger roads, so think 126, 114, and that type of road. So what we're seeing here is that growth were to occur and 0 transportation improvements were done. That's what that first no action means. It's a lot of growth, zero transportation improvements. That means a lot of travel time added. Then we go to what we're calling the RTP Plus, which is a combination, same growth, but a combination of the RTP and the local plans. So that reduces that quite a bit, as you can see here. And then the preferred scenario goes a little further. It's not super drastic change in travel time, but it does help and it does reduce it. But as you can see, that baseline is 2019, basically. Today, you could think. So there's still gonna be additional travel time, but it's gonna be minimized with all the improvements that are being planned. And then we also look at vehicle hour travels per household. I mean, that's a collection of the time spent on the roads in this area divided by the number of households in the area. So kind of a similar story. It's gonna go up slightly, but it's being minimized by the additional projects that are being planned. And then it just gives, once you have some time, there is a list of projects here and the planning level cost, which I obviously won't go through here, but it's there online if you want to look at it. We did the exact same thing with the transit portion. Now, the local transportation master plans don't have a transit component or as specific as the roadway side. So we started with the RTP, which is what it shows in here. There's a lot of, that is the final. Well, let's just look at this. So here we're looking at what the routes that were looked at under the preferred scenario. The difference between this and what is in the RTP is just additional frequency and maybe extending a few of the lines. And there are a few new lines that we tested under this preferred scenario. Another unique thing under the preferred scenario is that we tested autonomous rapid transit, which is that orange line that is in Harriman, Riverton. It's a preserved corridor. I'm not sure how familiar you are with that, but there have been efforts to preserve corridors, so we were testing what autonomous rapid transit would do. So we have some results for that. That's a separate memorandum that was provided, so you could contact MEG or UTA if you want the details for that. But that's something that was tested just to see if there is the demand for some service like that. But yeah, so for the transit, we're just, so all the dark blue lines are 30-minute transit for a peak periods, and then the lighter orange, like Redwood here, that is 5-minute. So very, very frequent. And there is one here on 126. So that was with transit. As far as how this performs, again, no action. We keep transit as it is. Growth occurs. We do see an increase in ridership just because there's more people and more jobs. Then the RTP comes in, adding a lot more frequency, a lot more lines, and it increases the ridership. And then we go to the preferred scenario that has a lot more frequency, a lot more lines, and that we're seeing about a 250% increase, more than what we're estimating for today. And just as the roadway side, we have a list here of what those projects are and roughly what the cost is. And this is the capital cost, so just buses and that type of thing. And then the last piece, like Megan mentioned, is active transportation. This was slightly different than the other roadway and transit because we didn't have metrics that were specific for active transportation, other than just seeing how much more household could be served by this facilities. So we started with the more regional facilities. So here, maybe it's a little hard to see on the screen, but we have Mountain View here, and there is this trail here. Those are the existing ones. Then we layered off kind of the bigger planned facilities for active transportation. And by active transportation, we mean primarily bike facilities for this, in this case. So these are all the regional facilities that are in some plan somewhere, whether that's local or regional. And then we added kind of the more minor connection that would kind of tie several of these facilities. With that, though, I hope we have it. Okay, we have it in the executive summary, but there is a graphic that we have with what the, I think it goes from, it covers like 60%, I believe, in the future once we add all of these additional trails or bikeways or anything like that. Another piece, and this is the last more technical piece of the study, was land use. Like Megan mentioned, it was not the focus of the study, but transportation and land use are inseparable. One is not with the other. So I'm not gonna go in a lot of detail on this, but we have all the information here. But what I did want to touch base on is what this does to the access to opportunity or access to jobs. So we have this separated by transit and auto. So for transit, in both cases, if the growth occurs and there is no improvement, transportation improvements, really the access decreases because of a lot of congestion. It's going to be hard to get around. Hence, you're going to have less access to jobs, even though there is more jobs. With the RTP plus, or both the RTP and the local plans, that goes up, and then with the preferred scenario, that goes up even more. So we have 150% for transit, and then somewhere around 60 and 70 for the car, for the private vehicles. So
the data actually is pretty interesting to look at how they got to this, because it's access to opportunity. So how long and how difficult, how expensive is it for you to get to a job in this location if you live here, right?
Yeah, so it takes into account both where people live and where the jobs are, as well as what your ability to get to have a vehicle or transit. Can you get there in a reasonable time frame? So it's very technical, and we don't need to get to it, but it takes both things.
I paused there because we've actually talked about that a lot with some of our growth issues, is that I always refer to it as the compounding effect, right? That the further out you live away from opportunity, like the more expensive it is. Like just living expenses, not necessarily even the cost of a home, but living expenses to get to job, sports for the kids. I mean, all those sorts of things. We all have to leave Harriman to go to work, to take our kids to soccer. We have to leave the city to do that. So it's more expensive. Sherry's talked about it with water, right? Farther they go out there, more expensive it's going to be, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's actually a pretty important piece of it.
Yeah, and this is the result of everything. It's access, what you can actually access. Yep.
Yeah, not to mention, when we talk about housing affordability, that H+T index is a much more accurate indicator of the actual cost of home ownership when you're including transportation costs associated with it, right? Being out here with fewer job centers and employment centers and education centers and entertainment venues and
actual
sports
living
activity
expenses
and all that other stuff. Yeah, everything else, we have to go somewhere else, yeah.
Yeah, from the previous study, the visioning study, there are some numbers for those, the economic numbers. We did not get into it for this study, but there are some numbers that maybe Megan can share as well, or maybe Councilman Henderson can share those.
Forwarded all this stuff.
Okay.
So I asked for you guys to come do the presentation because we haven't really discussed it.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So that's kind of the end of kind of the more technical work. All these details are in the story map. If you don't have the link, Megan can make sure that you get it. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to either one of us. Megan is going to talk about some of those recommendations and how this ties into the RTP that is happening right now.
A huge thank you to Natalia, because this contract has been put to bed, but I don't dare speak about this without her here because she's just too smart. So she graciously gave her time. I think it's because she's a Southwest Salt Lake County resident. I don't know. Okay, so let me just go through kind of the recommendations and next steps. So the recommendation of the study is, of course, this was the best scenario we came up with within our study. Here's the cost. It's a study, right? So it's not necessarily, this is what this whole area and all of the residents think is the best move. We did this on an analysis basis, but what the next steps would be are kind of outlined in this story map, which I won't go through these all. I'll just highlight a couple of them. The first one, continue to plan for center development, especially along transit improvements, right? So this is speaking to that land use piece of this that was incorporated. And then, of course, a big one, and this is really what I want to talk about, is for concepts not yet in the regional transportation plan, conduct feasibility studies to validate the need. You can't read that on this screen up there on the TVs, but that's the next step here. So we are not saying, you know, this is what you should do. This study had its results, right? So for whatever elements of this study that the communities want to carry forward and that the transportation partners want to continue to look into, that's what the processes that are already in place are for, right? So the regional transportation planning process, beginning now, there'll be workshops this fall. They're already looking for the lists of projects, right, that should be tested through this process. That would be your next step, right? If there are any projects that came out of this plan that the city feels, yeah, that would really be the right change for our community, the right direction forward. It would be to work through that regional transportation planning process, the UDOT prioritization process for fund, like, I mean, all of the next steps, right? And you are all very familiar with how to get projects done.
Don't assume that.
You're getting them done. You're doing great.
We're getting more familiar, and I just want to point out like how important that is, because we kept referring to the big study done in 2008 that said that there should be a freeway, totally east-west on 90th South. Obviously, that did not happen and is never going to happen now because the right-of-way was not preserved, and you'd have to knock down thousands of homes to do it. It's just not going to happen. So the best that they're talking about doing there is the flex lane thing, right, during commuting times. Exactly. That's not going to, and that's what they wanted. Like, that's the only thing they can really do once things are built out.
Well, and actually, that didn't show, you're right, you're absolutely right. And that didn't show up in this preferred scenario because this preferred scenario is looking at the year 2050. And that solution is no longer a solution in 2050 because the idea and the plans that we have, the best of our knowledge in doing this planning, is that there will be jobs and there will be other destinations west of there, right? So that's really a peak hour solution when everyone's trying to go the same way. But if everyone's going both ways, it's doesn't help anymore, right? It may help in the interim.
And the study basically was put on a shelf, right? It never went through this next part to really get into the actual plans, which then, once it's in the plans and gets priority, then it can get in line for funding. So right now, Bangerter, on that initial map, Bangerter is planned, right? That was the word used, is planned. These are the planned things, but that doesn't mean it's funded, right? As we just went through this last legislative session, 134th got funded, 27th West still is not funded. There's 5 intersections to the north, right, at the very north end of Bangerter that aren't funded, but it's in the plans, so they're in line to get funding at some point, but it has to get in the plans first. None of this all the work was done for this study, none of those new things are in the plans. We need to get them in the plans and then work with our regional partners, our representatives, senators, the other cities, to work towards putting funding to those things. Sorry to ad-lib, and this might go into some of the things but it was said at the meeting where they presented this to us and we kind of agreed on what those new things should be. It was in the realm of possibility. The east-west, I mean, that's what, a mile and a half between Bangerter and Mountain View? $800 million, as it is right now, right? If it continues to get filled in, Mayor Timothy and Bluffdale, they've benefited greatly from our cities working together to give Bluffdale our portion of some corridor preservation money to get Porter Rockwell done to I-15, right? That's the kind of collaboration we want to continue to foster and work with those partners, because we're going to need that to preserve the right-of-way west of Mountain View to U-111. That's going to be critical for this next part. Clint mentioned they funded U-111. Well, great. That just puts more compounding pressure on the roads that aren't done, right? So we need to work with them to get those funds for those things, get them on the plans, et cetera.
Yeah, and then the interesting thing about that I've learned, with my time on the Regional Growth Committee, is understanding the key value of these long-term plans that involve all of the regional partners and everybody involved.
Get in line.
Because if you don't have that, you're not on the list. Nothing you want is even talked about. Nobody even thinks about it. And so you have to go through these vetting processes. You have to go through these feasibility studies. You have to do all that so that you can even get in line and start competing for funding, right?
And data drives, sorry for kind of taking, but stealing maybe some thunder, but data drives this to a certain point, and then it becomes political, right? That was Sherry and I had a meeting with some of your fellow WFRC people a few years ago, because we were sitting there asking that question. These things are so obvious. Everyone agrees that we need to get these things done. How do we get it done? And after humming and hawing around, one of them finally said, when it comes down to it's politics. It's you get in a room with the people on that board and they choose the ones they want to choose. But you have to be on the list and go through the process and do the planning to even get on the board to get consideration. So.
Absolutely, and there's some politics, right? But there's also a process that we hope has made it easy for you to work through that process, right? For your staff to engage with ours.
And that data drives it to a certain point, and then
yeah, and I would have to double check which interchanges are funded, but all of Bangerter and those plans, they're in the regional transportation plan. Now that doesn't mean there's money allocated to them yet. That means that. So in that plan then goes and then you're playing in another league. You've got more geographies, but it compares and contrasts all of the different needs throughout the region, tries to take into account growth, and then you get to a phased plan where there's needs, and it may be you need this in 10 years, but then we financially constrain it. And that might mean, well, you may need it in 10 years. We anticipate it. There may be funding for it within the next 20. And it's in 10-year brackets like that. And so it's this whole process, and it's very data-driven. It's very community-based. We get in the rooms with small groups of the communities and trying to talk through these things. But that is one thing I want to address with this study is that whereas the regional transportation plan has about $3 billion going to this area, $3 billion going to this area, this would be more like $5 billion, this preferred scenario. So it's more expensive than the money that's currently going to this area. That doesn't mean we know exactly how much money in the next 30 years will be coming here, right? But that means that when the regional transportation planning process evaluates these things, there may be some push and some take and whatever.
So it's great that we have this, but the difference is $2 billion, right, from what's identified. So we need to work with our partners and get it on the list and start working with that process. So when money is available, we can capture that. It's going to take a long time to get it.
Yeah, I mean, there's planning that goes out till 2050, right now. I mean, that's the active plans. And so the plans that are currently adopted that have all the transportation programs and their listing and their priorities, you can go on the Wasatch Front Regional Council website and click on all these different roads, and it'll tell you what the priority is, how much the estimated costs are, when it's supposed to be completed, all that kind of stuff. There you go. Yeah, Wasatch Trinity 2050, there it is. So what's really interesting, though, is if you look out to the west, all of these things that are primary for our area are 20, 30 years down the road. I mean, they're so far away, and yet we're the fastest growing city in the country. We're having growth above and beyond what anybody else is experiencing. And so getting on the list puts us in a position now to start making the case that 30 years from now is way too long. 20 years from now might be way too long.
Well, and the big thing I want to drive home, as I've been a broken record for 2 years now, right, going through this, is we've got to work with our sister cities because we can't do it up by ourselves. They have to agree to put funding in those areas.
I really commend Harriman City for participating in this project. I haven't seen cities, cities come together all the time, but there was a lot of drive behind the community leaders and stakeholders within this. So, I come from the Metropolitan Planning Organization, so I'm going to say good job on regional collaboration, right, every time. But it was really impressive. And this is another resource I'll be sure to include the link for.
It's important because even though what Steve alluded to about our growth, St. George, same issue with growth. There's many cities all across the state, and so we're not competing with just our region.
Right.
We're competing with everything all over the state, and so our partners at the legislature, they have to acknowledge that, and they have to look not just regional, they have to look statewide, and we all have to share the same pot. So it's important. So even though it's like, well, we can't wait 20 years on this, it's like, well, these guys can't either, and you're always in competition with limited funds.
There will never be enough transportation money.
Exactly.
Good things happening all around, federally coming down, hopefully, with more money for transportation.
I'm hopeful of is I know you guys, I get emails every single day about, federal transportation funds that are likely going to be available, the state surpluses, in excess of what was divvied out this last year. So, and more so, I think, than in the last 10 to 20 years, really from what we were talking about through the study, there's more of an opportunity to get funding for some of these things, but we've got to be proactive and work with our partners to get it done.
The numbers are frankly staggering. I mean, you're talking about a $5 billion investment in roads just in our 6 or 7 cities, right? I mean, you're not talking about the whole Wasatch, you're not talking about the Salt Lake Valley, you're not even talking about the whole Wasatch Front or the whole state. That's $5 billion just in these communities.
And it's not including I-15, which is obviously a major
Right.
infrastructure background. If we were to include that, right, it would just skew the numbers. Yeah, it's a lot of money. That's transit as well. So that number does have the transit piece in there. Can I answer any more questions while we're here? And this is a conversation, as Councilman Henderson noted, he's come to talk to us. Our door's always open, and we'll be reaching out to you very shortly for the Wasatch Choice workshops. If you see that, if you have a voicemail missed from us, you know that we're calling you to come to a workshop. We want you there. We want to listen. We're going to ask you a bunch of questions, but we really just want to hear from you. We'll have maps there, markers, all the fun, and they'll be in person this year.
I have just one quick thing. And it's not anything wrong with the study per se. It's just a thought. So as I see, can you go back to the transit preferred scenario and go down to the map? So I see, as I look through this map, and I'm seeing the infrastructure hard lines that they're putting in, the routes, the automatic services. That all looks great, and I'm grateful for it. What I see when I look at this is I see our residents looking at it going, well, why doesn't anything really come into our city at all? And there's a good answer for that, and part of that is we have the microtransit, the process that we've been going through, and that's been extremely successful. Is there any way, and this is maybe just for future or as we have that conversation, to make sure that we're including, because when people think transit, they think buses and they think TraxLine, and they don't think the microtransit system. And I think that's just a small deficiency in the communication, the information of not communicating that out to the residents and to the leaders of the other community, if that's the way we intend to address that particular transit issue. I don't think that I'm fine with what's there, knowing that is our solution to it. It's just making sure that's included somewhere in these studies moving forward, that's our intent, is to go through that process and use that microtransit, specifically since it is such a new process, but it has been so successful.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Oh, go ahead.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, the main reason that it wasn't included in this is that it was a pilot program, right? It's not planned for anything, and ETA just recently, I think they came and gave us a presentation that said
just recently.
we felt it was successful and we want to continue it for now, but it's still not.
But this is also a hybridized solution, right? It's not saying
this, yeah.
It's a trade-off between getting a whole bunch of public transportation or getting an $800 million freeway connection, or some things have to give somewhere. And so that's one of the compromises, I think.
And to be fair, a lot of that falls on UTA. And
Yes,
they told us just a few months ago, they actually have no plans, zero plans to bring anything into Harriman. Zero. These lines that you've outlined here are basically the corridor that we've preserved for it. If they put it to use some way, what it would look like, right?
At least nothing in the next 30 years.
Yeah, and I was going to say that. We're looking at 30 years. Maybe in 30 years, microtransit is maybe not viable in this area. We really don't know. And we don't have a very good way of testing that far into the future, because it's been super successful in this area. But
my only concern is that we're putting things right. Part of this process is to get things on the list, right? That's kind of what we've talked about, is getting things on the list. What I don't want to have happen is, and I'm not saying that we should change what we've done. I think this is fantastic work, and I'm so excited to see what we've come up with. What I don't want to have happen is for us to simply, to not recognize that we are being in the corner, are missing out on some of that transit option, with the intent of saying we're trying to find novel, unique solutions, not necessarily always the traditional of we have to have a bus line or we have to have a track line. So I love the idea of automatic rapid transit. Like, I think that's fantastic, and if we get to that point where that's, truly viable in 10, 15 years, that's great. But who knows if it actually will become viable, as opposed to the microtransit, which is, the Uber for UTA kind of situation. So that's just my only probably feedback in regards to this. However, please don't take that in any way as like negative criticism. It's more just something that I would make sure that we don't miss out. I think everything else has been fantastic.
That's great feedback, and UTA was right there at the table with us. And I will say that with that autonomous rapid transit, that's a very new, fun idea. How cool would that be? But UTA did acknowledge that if it were to come to it and a bus rapid transit with a fixed guideway was viable in that line, the autonomous piece of that would not be the Achilles heel, right? So they want to make sure that you know that
I'm
that's
fine
not
either way.
autonomous or nothing.
It's either way, it's fine as long as that type of infrastructure comes in. Like that's bus rapid transit versus autonomous, whatever. Either way is fine. But and that's just me speaking.
Here we go. Fixed guideway. The engineer is over here jabbing.
But just I know that that's something that we hear, and even going back as I was looking through the travel routes and the traffic trends and seeing where it's going, like that's the thing that I see is because we continue to travel, until we do get maybe some of that core businesses and stuff down here, we're going to continue to struggle with that. So that's just my concern. But like I said, I'm not the expert. You guys did a great job. That's the only thing that I see that I had a little bit of concern.
They did, just for our staff. I was just as difficult with them as I am with you guys on this stuff, so thank you.
You weren't difficult at all.
You say that to all the politicians.
If I can just put in one quick plug here too for Megan and Andrew, the people at Wasatch Regional Council. One of the things that I think gets overlooked is what a great resource it is. And the wicked smart IT guys they have down there. They talk about all the time their desire and willingness and ability to assist us in doing analysis, creating specialized maps, looking at information. I mean, they've got resources to really help us move forward. So I'm really glad you guys were able to help out with this project. I think it's great results. But we know as we're going forward, there's more research to be done, there's more battles to be fought, and we appreciate the asset that the Regional Council is. So,
Really appreciate that. This was an innovative project for us. We don't do this kind of thing very much because we have processes for this, but it's kind of hard for someone to toss a 90th South Freeway into that and for the whole process to not blow up. So this was cool to be able to work with you all on this. We hope to be able to do more of this in the future.
Into a room of elected officials, and we all said, we want this and this and this and this and this. And
Like, okay.
It's the only time we could go, sure,
Whatever you want, sir. Yes, absolutely.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you, Megan.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
You guys are fantastic. Thank you again. All right. So that concludes the very lengthy reports presentation and appointments portion of our meeting. So we will move on to the consent agenda, to which, just because I want to take the personal privilege, I will make the motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
Second?
Steve?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Jared?
yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
And I will vote yes, that motion passes. And we move on to item 11.1, discussion and consideration of a resolution authorizing the insurance of a sale of not more than $11,500,000 aggregate principal amount on the sale of franchise tax revenue bonds and related matters. Our Finance Director, Alan Ray.
Month ago, we talked about the $800,000 a year that the legislature granted us over the next 15 years. A proposal was made to bond for that amount for 15 years, and it would amount to about $11 million bond. Would have a payment of about $800,000. We're considering tonight a parameters resolution that would allow staff to begin the process of moving forward to possibly doing this bond. So this parameters resolution, as you kind of know, sets the outward ranges of the parameter. And this particular parameters resolution allows for up to a 5% interest rate. However, right now we're at 1.4%. It would allow up to 16 years, though we would expect this to only be a 15-year. And so it gives us the outward parameters, but so this is for you to consider whether or not we want to move forward with the parameters resolution. This does give 30 days to object to it once you have approved this resolution. Not only for you to object, but for the residents to object. So
We have a list of the road projects. I think that's what we had asked for
Yeah,
last time.
that's my problem is
Before we
I-
moved to this, we
I'm
wanted
excited
a
about to do
set
the
list
bond, but
of
for
what
what?
those, what the projects would be.
I also think that I wanted to know about the 800,000. Are we guaranteed those funds? Or, you know, it's like just because they say they're going to give them to us, what's binding in that?
The 800,000 was approved in House Bill 244, so I have not seen anything that doesn't guarantee it. So as right now, it's guaranteed. The project list that we've put together is the same list that was provided to the legislature for our legislative priorities that I think went out to all the council. It was a map that had some bulleted some numbers on the project list. We've been going through refining that because some of the projects, we didn't have a dollar amount at that time. It was a Christmas wish list. So we've been breaking some of the projects down to smaller pieces to make more sense. What we've focused on, we haven't got our estimates finalized yet, that's why you haven't seen them, but we've focused on roadway projects that are along areas that are currently developed. Those were our first priority because those areas will not be generating impact fees. So those ones made the most sense to put first. So our first two projects were along Main Street. One of those is priority because of the school too. The new Hidden Oaks Elementary School is going to be coming on. So we need to figure out how to get that road paid for as that road goes in. So that's Main Street, not down to the school, but up towards it. The other section was 6,000 West. And then beyond that, the extra money after those two projects we're looking at is probably around 500,000 to 1.2 million. And what makes sense there is we have some obligations with our MDAs that we have with Creek Ridge to do some sections of road. And so we've been looking at how to break those apart and satisfy our obligations, but not overextend ourselves.
That's actually my fear in not having a specific list attached to it. This is what the funds go to, is that those funds that, really in my opinion, this type of money needs to go towards, we just spent a bunch of money on the road study, right, for all the roads that need to be repaired. There are a bunch of them in red that need to be replaced, and they're all existing roads. They don't have, there's no other funding available to replace them. All the ones that you mentioned and others, for however many years I've been involved in this now, 8 years, has been, we'll do those when we have the money. Well, there's never any money for them. Like this, to me, this is like the only chance we have to do those things. I don't want to see that money go towards this stuff in the MDAs or other obligations, because there's other funds to pay for those things. Those other, our aging, we're starting to have aging infrastructure, and we're behind, is what the study told us, significantly. And unless we do something like this to catch up on those things, we'll remain behind forever and end up, and I apologize, both my in-laws, my parents and my in-laws live in West Jordan. West Jordan's roads are terrible. They just don't keep up on them. We need to increase our maintenance budget, but we'll never be able to rebuild those roads. So at least for me, like, I don't want to authorize any kind of bond on that road money unless we have a fairly definitive list. These are the major ones we think will be about this cost we want to get done. If there's money left over, here's the others that we're looking at, sort of thing. Just me, the second thing was that in a previous meeting, it was mentioned that the underwriters don't have as much faith and trust in the state to come good on that. They want us to back the bonds with sales tax money, et cetera, right? So, Alan,
That's not exactly true, but, okay.
Well, that's why I'm pointing to you.
What it is
Refreshes.
they always require two sources to back up any bond, okay? They're not saying we don't trust the state. They're saying we want a second source, okay? So you have to have double the security for everything you do. So, okay, so they're saying you have 100% of it coming from the state. We want a second source, okay? They're not saying we don't trust the state, but you know, any debt you do, they don't let you borrow one-to-one, okay?
Be the case anyways, they'd want that
Right.
extra
They
collateral.
want a second source. So they're not, when we say, no, they don't trust the state, that's.
I think the impression most of us had was that, well, hold on, maybe we can't guarantee that 800 every single year. What if the state doesn't pay for some
Okay.
reason? What
No,
is on
what
us?
I'm saying is there needs to be two sources of support. Not that they don't trust the state or, no. They're saying, we don't accept 100% from anything. You've got to have two sources of security, okay? So that's what they're saying, okay? You can't go and buy a car and finance 100% of it, okay? Same thing goes here. You can't do 100% now. Okay, we could probably bond $400,000 or $4 million right now and not put a second source on. But right, what I've gone is proposed that we do the entire amount. So we need something else to back it up, okay?
And what's our ability to make good on our backup?
Well, right now, we're about 4 times coverage on our sales tax, so we do have room if we choose to. But,
We would just have less to allocate to capital projects in
Right.
other years.
Yeah.
so, yeah. You know, right now, there is a bill that guarantees us that money for 15 years. The legislature can override that at any time, I suspect. But right now, that's not what,
I don't think that would happen
Yeah.
if cities are going out and using
To kind of Blake's comment about getting estimates on the total cost of the roads, I don't know that any of us expect to have like a finite cost or anything. I mean, we know ballpark, give or take a few $100,000, kind of what those major ones will be. Like, personally, I want it in writing that this is what this money is for.
I can tell you Main Street is looking like it's going to be somewhere between $7.5 and $8.5 million. It's a big project. And there's a lot of things that are going into this analysis. 6,000 West, for example, is one we're trying to put on there because there's a sewer project that's going to be going on. There's a water line project we're trying to piece together. So there's a lot of savings there because the water impact fee can pay for the water line. The sewer district can pay for the asphalt cost. And so we can make those dollars go a lot further. So if that's a $2 million project, we might be able to get $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000 even paid for with these other funds. And we can stretch that out and push it to another project. So our anticipation with this project plan is we're going to have 5 projects on there, but we're probably only going to be able to do 2.5 or 3 projects total with this money.
I won't speak for Steve Sherry, but for me, that's what I want is, here's the list. Priority 1 and 2, these are the 2 that we think are absolutely going to get done, and if there's enough money, here's the others.
Yeah, like we said, I think the comment was made when Justin came with the water bond. There was a very specific list of here's what this one's going to be, here's our wish list, and here's everything that we're going to get done with this bond.
I can tell you there's a list that we discussed it today. We're putting it together. It's just, we're not comfortable presenting that just yet because some of the numbers are still moving around. We will have it ready by August 11th, our next meeting. We'd be presenting it at the next meeting in 2 weeks if we were having one, but since it's the month, the 24th, it's going to be August 11th when we present it to you.
I guess my problem is then I'm not comfortable saying yes to something without it until I actually see that in the packet and have it. Then I'm not super comfortable about moving forward on something until I see it.
It's just the parameters.
And I'm curious, is this a a special list because this is special one-time money, or is this just, I mean, Jonathan gave us a list of what, 33, if I remember right?
We tried to keep the
30
list
something.
consistent with what was provided to the legislature because that's what the money was for, was they came back, they provided the money in the bill saying, you asked for all these projects, here's the money
Here's what we
for,
can give
do
you.
as many as you can. So we kept it consistent so that we
That makes
didn't
sense.
present one bunch of projects and then do a bunch of others with
So,
the money.
so it is a separate list of priorities outside of our normal
They're all
capital
part of our
projects list.
capital
They're
projects
part of it,
list.
but they were highlighted as projects we'd like the state to give us money for.
Yeah, and the
Okay.
focus on these two projects were the ones that had the lower amounts that were attributable to new growth. So impact fees didn't go as far for these two projects,
There aren't
Maine and
other
6,000.
funding
I'm gonna,
sources.
I'm gonna ask our assistant city manager, and our city manager here to chime in on this.
Mayor, can I make a comment too?
That we met with the legislators, and those were the projects that you discussed with each of our legislators. That's the list of
Right.
projects that he's talking about.
Just a second,
If,
Clint.
if I might, it sounds like we need to give you a list. So I would recommend we just continue this to the next meeting. And we will provide you a list of those. Obviously, we have another study that says we have a bunch of roads. I haven't seen that yet. I'd like to look at that. But we will get you a list. It's perfectly appropriate as council for you to decide we're not ready to act tonight. And I'm getting the sense you are not. And we can keep talking about it, but we'll just get you the list for the next meeting.
Nate, Clint, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think it was probably Tammy there that I might have heard make a comment that even though we don't have the specific list in front of us, we've seen this list of at least the ones that we know are on our radar multiple times. And again, to Blake's credit, you know, he's continuing to drill down on those costs and try and give us the most accurate information. I don't think that any of us will see a project on that list that we are surprised by, because we've talked about these road projects that we have many times. And the second piece to my comment is that we're not finalizing a bond tonight. We're just really approving a parameters resolution that allows them to start going out and this is the again the parameters of a bond that we would enter into. And so for me, I don't want to delay the process of again securing the money for the bond to get the best benefit out of it, because I think we have plenty of time still to reconcile the projects that we want to focus this money onto as Blake and the rest of the team continues to drill down on those initial costs.
But I don't think any of us are worried about being surprised by something not being on the big list of sent to legislature, where I guess again, I don't want to speak for anybody else. Where I'm coming from is, okay, now we know how much money we have, and it's not for we don't have enough to do all of those things. We have this kind of one opportunity for us to decide what those priorities are. And I agree with how you're going about it, but I want to tie, if I'm going to prove this bonding, this 15 years of this money that we may never get again, I want to make sure that the roads that we want done for those reasons are the ones that get done.
There's nothing here that prevents
I absolutely agree with that. I think we would all, by the time we finalize this bond, have a specific list tied to it. Again, this is just the bond parameters resolution that we're looking at tonight to continue to allow that process to move forward.
Just keep in mind that you have to set the budget for whatever this money is spent, okay? None of this is budgeted to be spent. Even if we go out and bond, the money is not budgeted to be spent until you set the budget.
I agree with that, but I also would make a point that we send out packets to the public, and I just think that whenever we're talking about approving an almost $12 million bond, I think it's important just to simply, we might know that, but I just think it's good to have the public be able to look at that and say, here's what they're bonding for. Here's what the projects are for. And I just think that piece of it is missing here. I think it's important to convey that to anybody who takes the time to look at this.
I don't think it's going to be harmful to wait till August 4th to have that list tied to it.
It's up to you guys.
Steve, what's your thoughts?
I agree with all of the points that have been made. I guess my position would be right now that I think there are financial interests that are better served by moving sooner than later in terms of interest savings. Interest rates are going up on bonds and stuff, so the sooner we can get it, the more favorable interest rates we're likely to get, at least in the current market prognostications. Our ability to allocate that money budget-wise later is still our trump card, if you will. You know, this doesn't just get approved and
That's what I
gets
don't
paid
like
within-
about it. The reason Sherry just stated.
And I can appreciate that. I guess I would just verbalize, I would probably support the parameters resolution, but until we exactly know what's being spent, it does cause me some pause.
Okay.
But I'm generally willing to move forward.
So, Alan, remind me again then, because you said we only have 30 days from this to object. What does that mean? Go through this resolution to do the parameters, you take it out to basically bond council, and they start shopping it and say, okay, here's the deal, and then you have
Well, no, it's essentially the residents' objection. You guys can object to it any time up until we actually close the deal. You know, and in reality, I guess Nathan or I are the ones that actually closed the deal, but, you know, so, but the 30 days gives the residents a time to object to it. If they object to it any time during that time, it stops the deal until you make take an action on it.
So I think procedurally, I guess this is the kind of sticking point for me, was my understanding is that the parameters allow you to go out and do it, right? It doesn't come back to us to approve. Administratively, they just do it.
Right.
It only comes back to us to spend it.
And then they have to come back to the budget to say.
So, with that said, I'll just, if I might, Mr. Mayor, make a motion.
Okay.
I would just make a motion that we table item 11.1 until our next meeting and get the list, and we can take action on it at that time.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this motion before I take a vote? Okay, hearing none, I will accept a vote on this. We'll go with Jared.
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Clint?
No, just for the reasons I stated, I was comfortable moving forward with the bond resolution.
Steve?
Yes.
And I will vote no as well. I would be comfortable moving forward now. I don't think that it would prevent us from what we're trying to accomplish. However, the vote passed, which means that this item has been tabled till our August 4th meeting. So with that,
Mayor.
we will, what?
We cannot have it on the August 4th meeting.
Sorry, 5th.
August 14th.
The August 11th meeting.
Per whatever our recorder says is the appropriate date.
Our next meeting, August 11th.
Our next
I think
regular
I said
council
August
meeting.
4th, somebody else. said
Sorry, August 4th is the truth and taxation, and we can do nothing other than truth and taxation on
That's
that day.
correct. Thank
So
you.
thank you very much for, once again, Jackie is always right. All right, so we will move on to item 11.2, discussion and consideration of a resolution acknowledging receipt of a tentative budget and tentatively adopting the Harriman City tentative budget for the fiscal year 2021-2022, and to schedule a truth and taxation public hearing on August 4th. Alan.
Okay, I guess we've published the tentative budget to you. It does have the increase in it with our tax increase that we proposed as of, for the April 4th meeting.
August 4th.
August.
August 4th.
August 4th, okay, yes.
And once again, that's the same taxing adjustment that we were referring to, where
Right.
we are simply reallocating.
Okay. And just clarification, we are taking the tax rate that has been on the Unified Fire Service area and adding it to the Harriman City amount so that the amount that's being taxed to our residents will not change. It will just be a matter of us collecting it versus Unified Fire. So do we have any questions that I can answer regarding the budget? If not, we would ask that the tentative budget be approved. We would then publish the budget so that our residents will have access to it prior to a public hearing.
So the tentative adoption of the tentative budget is tentative because it's pending the truth and taxation hearing.
Yeah, well,
This is always the process of the tentative process first, then we've seen it, now the
But it-
residents get to see it.
But that's the only reason we're not formally adopting the final budget at this point is we're waiting.
yeah,
for that. Okay.
yeah.
But
if
everything
we-
else is pretty much the same.
We, in a normal year, would have approved or adopted our budget by June 20th. But because of the truth in taxation, August 17th now, it has to be approved by, so.
But Steve, just to clarify, the tentative budget always comes out first. It's once we have said, this is what we're ready to show the public, that's the tentative budget, then we approve the final budget.
I get it, but the reason why
It's not
our
already
tentative
done.
budget wasn't already approved.
Yeah, okay, yes.
Is because of this
Yes.
taxation
We
issue.
are actually, we're actually functioning right now based on a tentative budget because
In July.
We're behind, yeah.
July 1st was the beginning of our budget year, so we are actually functioning based on what you proposed originally. Now you have to adopt it and so forth. So.
I will make a comment while you're standing there. It's a difficult job to try and calculate a tax without getting anything official from Salt Lake County, and you calculated it perfectly. So kudos to you. It's really impressive.
Let's be careful. That tax rate is like, what, 7 decimal places out?
I was gonna say,
And he
it's not like-
calculated,
it's
it's
not
not
like
just
it's
like
it's not like it's
2.5%,
2 decimal
right? I mean, this is like
Yeah.
way out there.
Very, very impressive. Thank you, Alan, for doing
Well,
such a great
thank
job
you.
on that.
But, yeah, the county finally did come through with their calculation about 4 days later, but,
Yeah, but you're supposed to right on. That's pretty good.
yeah, so.
All right, do we have any further discussion on this item? I'll accept a motion.
Motion to approve Resolution R17-2021, acknowledging receipt of a tentative budget and tentatively adopting the budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2021 and ending June 30th, 2022, and to schedule a truth and taxation public hearing on August 4th, 2021.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clint?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And I will vote yes, that motion passes. We will move on to item 11.3, discussion consideration of an ordinance authorizing a text amendment to adopt language to enable large project master plan communities. Chase?
Thank you, Mayor. So this item is back on your agenda after being presented initially to you at the last work meeting. This is the exact same presentation that you saw at that time, so I'll go through it rather quickly, but you can stop me if you have any questions. Again, this item was brought by the Planning Commission after they considered a change to Title 10 of the Harriman City Code to create a planning tool that would allow a landowner, a qualifying landowner, to come to the city to create potentially a new zone, have that accompanied by a development agreement and some other items that I'll touch on again briefly. That has gone to the Planning Commission. They've had that presentation. They've held a public hearing on that. They've made a recommendation to vote to this city council to approve this land use tool with a vote of 6-0 with one modification, which again, I'll highlight in just a moment. And then like I mentioned earlier, you did see this at the last work meeting where we had a robust discussion on this. Again, here are the existing zones within Harriman City. There are subzones within each one of these. Again, we've got agricultural, residential zones. This would likely fall under our special districts or zones. We do have one currently. That would be the Automall Special District that you created just a few years back. Any subzone that would come in with this planning tool would likely fall under one of these special zones. We talked briefly at the last meeting about why this tool makes sense within Harriman City. one of the qualifiers for a landowner to use this tool would be having at least 400 contiguous acres. The Planning Commission recommended reducing that requirement to 200 acres. I've got a map that will show where this would apply at the end of this presentation that will help, I think, initiate some of that discussion. We did talk about that a little bit at the work meeting as well. As I listened to that again, it wasn't clear whether we do 200 or 400. So if you're ready to make a decision on this tonight, just include that in your, well, it's written for 400, and that was the proposal.
We need to change it.
If you want to change it, yes, it would just need to be called out in your motion. Against, a qualifying landowner would approach the city and propose a new subzone. Part of their application would have to include the name of the subzone, a map of the property, identify what the permitted, conditional, and accessory uses would be within that area, and then be accompanied by a proposed development agreement. The development agreement has a number of requirements that need to be included. Again, this is at the city council's discretion. Obviously, if they don't approve the development agreement, the application is simply denied. Once the development agreement is approved, it's intended that this become an administrative implementation, just like we see with other zones. Once an application has been made and a proposed development comes in that complies with the underlying zone, the execution of that development would become, again, administrative, not including those items which by state statute or our local ordinances require Planning Commission or City Council approval. So here's the map I was referring to. The areas in blue are those that are either developed or covered by an existing development agreement, so they're entitled to one degree or another. The areas in green are those that are unentitled. They do have underlying existing zones, but they aren't developed or otherwise are unentitled. You'll see in the south corner, there's those 1,100 acres. That's a contiguous 1,100 acres, but there's different ownership within those. One of those owners is Laguna. There's Laguna and Malibu, those two areas.
Is any of it under one owner that's 200 acres plus?
What's the breakout of those?
So Laguna is like 247, and then Malibu makes up the 100. Yeah. So, and again, you have to consider as well, if you did do 200 acres, it's possible that that be split up into 4 or 5 potentially different large master plan communities. But if your threshold was over 200 or over 250, right, it would exclude certain areas unless they were to combine to meet that threshold requirement. I don't know if I explained that well.
Yep.
That's a mistake. Yeah, there's the Kennecott land and the Olympia land, which is outside of the city border. The Olympia land is entitled under a development agreement with the county currently. Kennecott is not. No, that's a mistake on my part. So that's unentitled. Yeah. Jared I apologize for that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I do have a question too in the requirements. I'm just curious, is this just always a standard practice that we have the developers write the initial MDA? Why isn't the city writing the initial MDAs? Why are we asking the developer to come with their MDAs rather than us writing the MDA?
I guess it's just part of the procedure that we've proposed, and it just be included as part of the application. I think
I think that's a great point, because we talked a lot about some key components that should be included in every MDA that somehow get forgotten every time there's a new one.
So wouldn't it make more sense for the city to write the MDA?
So that's to me is, are we doing work for stuff that's never going to happen? What's to keep somebody from coming in and saying, I want an MDA for this, and then just have us do all this work and then walk away and say, well, I'm not interested, and we spend all this time and money.
But it's the same process if we have to go through it either way. But it seems easier for us to write our core MDA. A lot of it's going to be boilerplate language anyway, and this is the city's acceptable standard on an MDA. Here you go, developer.
Or here's the base standard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right?
I think that's a great point, and two things I might recommend would be, one, we could simply change the language to say that your application will not be approved until an MDA is acceptable, which gives us the opportunity to draft that first one, or we approve a Form MDA with these requirements. So
I'd be comfortable with something like.
if you look on your screens, those are in the ordinance that's being proposed, requirements to be included in the MDA. And at the very end, it does say any other items that the city determines appropriate. So we could handle that concern that you brought up in one of those two ways.
It just feels to me like too oftentimes we're the passenger side of the MDA rather than the driver's seat. And I feel like that would put the city in the driver's seat of the MDA rather than allowing the developer to be in the driver's seat of these MDAs. And we're always having to, I think it would lessen the back and forth a little bit too when they say, no, this is what's required in our MDA.
Such as no non-commercial uses in commercial zoned areas.
Right.
Schools, churches, et cetera. That has to be boilerplate in every stinking MDA.
Right.
And you do not get to condense density by putting a church or school in the middle of residential. You lose those units.
So,
I just think, I think we could, if we could boilerplate a lot of the problems that we've seen in MDAs, just boilerplate them into our own MDA, and if you want to come in
Or
with
you
this.
can just put them on this list,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
These are the basic things that have to be included in.
So I think what you're hearing from
I
council
agree.
is some direction to maybe either come up with a specific list of things that must be included or a template MDA that we would be comfortable putting into to policy and or ordinance, depending on what your recommendation would be, and moving forward from there.
And I think we've started a lot of that work already
Yeah.
in the work that's being done on the OHMDA proposals, right? So
I'd
I
actually
give my
find
feedback.
bullet pointing those
Yeah,
extra things here. It has to include these things.
Yeah, and I think you guys were copied on the email that I sent that had all those like bullet point items, right? And so, you know, some of those are
Well, and we've said it over,
Right.
I know I've said
But
those
I'm
exact words
really in
right
support
here
of this
for
idea. Yeah.
5 freaking years now.
Yeah, I
And
like
we
this
and
idea.
they still don't get included.
Councilman Smith, do you have any thoughts or feedback? I just want to make sure he's still awake.
No, I'm still here. Again, as Chase really said there, you know, there's a couple of ways to deal with it. I don't disagree with the fact that, you know, we need to make sure that the protections that we want each time are included in the MDA. However, we need to go about making sure that those protections are, you know, are standard in there. That's what I look to the attorney for. You know, whether it's, I can kind of see putting a little bit of the onus in terms of the initial legwork on the applicant instead of putting all of that on. But again, if we have a boilerplate or if we have a list of things that have to be included in there, whatever mechanism we use to make sure that, again, those protections are put in there for the city, then again, that's where I look to our council to figure out the best way to do that, to make sure that we're covered.
If I could recommend another thought I just had. If you are ready to move forward on this tonight, you could simply remove the requirement that an application include a proposed MDA. And then what we could do as an administration is come back to you with a policy about how this would be implemented, which would include us being the originators of the MDA.
I don't care, honestly, I don't care who writes it. I want those specific things to be mandatory.
And to Councilmember Oren's point, that allows us to get that in first rather than, like you said, being the passenger and trying to steer the car.
As long as administratively that is concrete, and it lists those things in the policy, it has to include these core things.
So to make that, just so that I'm under.
If there's some way they can get out of it, I'm coming after you.
The good thing is,
That's
the
what I have Chase for.
the language of this ordinance does say that it is entirely at the discretion of the city council. So if this tool is denied, if an application made under this tool is denied, they just resort back to traditional zoning tools, R210.
At our discretion
whatever
I
it might
love
be.
if we don't agree, it all goes back to what it was, rather than we're gonna do everything and then hope we agree at the end.
Right.
And not be able to repeal it. I don't like that either, so.
So just so that if somebody did want to make a motion, we were looking at basically, you know, the motion as it stands with how would we adjust that to correctly encapsulate what we've talked about? I'm looking for your recommendation.
Simply with the condition that
A
an
policy
MDA accompany an application. If you choose to remove that requirement, that would be the only change to the language.
And that we, prior to implementation, that we require a policy be created and brought to the council for the MDA requirements. Would that be sufficient to ensure that that would be included in?
We don't want to pass this tonight and
Right.
have slip through and we don't get any.
Right. Yeah.
That would be sufficient so that we would be able to ensure that any process we go through, if we got an application tomorrow from from someone new, that would go through that process. I think it would be because it's pretty clear that it's our discretion regardless, so if they don't want to agree to it, they're not going to
So
agree to it either way.
I do have two questions. Number one is that in addition to these green areas, another item that we have on the agenda tonight could possibly make this applicable to other areas.
Right.
So I have two questions. Number one is, would that adjustment in the language about the MDA impact the rest of the items that we're talking about here tonight, which I think the answer is no. And then the second question is there any timing issue that if this were not approved tonight for some reason, that would impact any of the other items that we have on the agenda?
I think the only one that would come to mind would be returning with a policy. I think we could have that done at the next meeting. It would be whether it comes to a work meeting and then a subsequent discussion and action item
Would
agenda.
that affect whether or not we approve the petition for Olympia Hills?
So they're.
Sometimes you don't beat around the bush.
I just want to make sure it's not related, right? It's not going to mess up OH or anything they want to try and
It
accomplish.
might affect an application under using this tool.
Got it.
If
It
they
would delay
can't-
that
If they
application.
can't make an application until a policy is
But
approved.
it would, this and the accompanying policy would apply to anything they apply for.
I would admit, yeah, I agree.
Just for some clarification for staff, so we draft a policy, we'll bring you, as part of that policy, would have a model MDA or a template, whatever you want to call it. Do you want that at a work meeting, or would it be sufficient to have that as discussion at a council meeting for you to determine at that point? Again, thinking about the timing, if you have a meeting, then you wait another, I know your
Whatever's-
concern is being, what do
whatever
we get?
is the proper process for us to approve a policy to it, and if it needs to be, I mean, both meetings are the next meeting.
Right.
Is any policy, you can always say, not tonight, if we bring it in a regular meeting. So I'm just thinking, again, trying to get it into an adopted policy earlier, you could forego the work session. If you want to do that, we're certainly happy to do that. I can work with Chase on a policy format.
I don't know that we would, I'm fine to have the discussion here.
Yeah, I think
I was
discussion.
gonna- I was gonna say, I think we've had pretty
We've
good
had
direction on
Good
that.
work meetings on this already, and.
So
This is the last
just
piece.
so that we don't get bogged down next time, the intent would be to bring the policy back, have a discussion and action on that particular policy, which of course can always be changed because it's simply a policy. It is not an ordinance. Is there any concern or conflict on that? I would hate to be surprised next week somebody
You know,
saying.
that's actually a good point.
I would hate for somebody to come up at the last second and be like, oh, well, we never do this. Now we're doing this for this, and this is like, I just want to make sure that the body here is comfortable doing that before we come back, and say something
Because if
different.
it's included in this, it's part of the zone,
It's part of the zone.
right? And it's maybe a little more cumbersome to change that in the future rather than if we get a smaller application, oh, hey, that policy doesn't, we want it.
Right.
Kind of had an example of that earlier tonight of we changed
I
something.
think-
maybe
Well, I think there's
something
two
we
things,
thought was
right?
smaller.
There would be the policy for this zone, and then there's a general policy for all MDAs in the whole city, right? Whether that's for 40 acres or 4,000 acres, right?
I think we should keep them separate, in all honesty. Like, I like the idea of having an MDA policy that is separate and standalone. It might have something specific for large adjustments, but if we're talking about the minimum standards of what we want in MDA, it should be its own separate policy, separate regardless. So what my recommendation would be is that we approve what we're talking about tonight, with the condition that the staff bring back us a policy in regards to MDAs, at our next meeting for discussion and action at our next meeting. Specifically because we've had these conversations.
Then we're doing it once instead of twice.
Do it
Yeah,
once.
I agree.
And that way it becomes they're two separate things that we're talking about. We're talking about, land use, and we're talking about MDAs as separate items. We keep them separate. Then if we do want to go back and say, hey, we missed something in our policy for MDAs, it's easy for us to go back and update our policy versus having to go through an entire land use issue.
So would the motion include language that said something, that said that an MDA would accompany the application under our policy? Or, I mean, how would we say that?
I would probably recommend, here's the thing, development agreements are so site-specific. I mean, they do have those boilerplate language, but sometimes even that changes based upon other factors that you're interested in with that particular development.
We want it to include the requirements.
We have an MDA.
We want it to include the requirements in the MDA policy. I mean, because, but to that point, that's why I keep going to, we need to just have a list of, here's the main things that have to be included. Because if we just do a boilerplate, there's different wording that could change from that. But if we include those key, it has to include just these things, right, at a minimum, then that gets us where we want to be.
And if we do it as policy, we are able to capture that and adjust as needed.
So I don't have I didn't bring the red line, the red print version in here. I did get one, Jackie. I just realized I left it on the table in there, so somebody needs the exact wording of how to do this.
I don't have the red one either, Jackie.
So-
I left
What
mine
wording,
in there.
what wording do
I
they
left
need to
mine in
add
there.
to what they have?
I think we need to.
Well,
to
I guess
strike-
let me also
This is what it says.
follow up with, do you want to have further discussion on the minimum threshold requirement for 200 to 400 acres?
So my opinion in that one is.
I'm fine with 200. I mean,
I prefer 400 in all honesty. I think it's just gonna be a preference of the different council members. I don't see any reason why 400 is not sufficient. As I said earlier today, I don't like making decisions based on one particular potential applicant's potential requests when we're making policies and things like that. So in regards to an ordinance, I think 400 is sufficient, and I'm not making that based for behalf of somebody who has a potential application they might consider. I think 400 is the right number. That's my thoughts.
This is Clint. I'll just say that I think the intent here all along has been to give us another tool to use. It's another tool to help us in our planning and our development. And I think the more opportunities, honestly, that you have to utilize a tool that you really believe in, and I think as long as we're moving forward with this, then we believe in it. And to that, I think I have no problem going to 200 acres. Again, it gives us more opportunities to potentially use the tool.
I'm really okay with the 200. I agree with you, and I don't want to do something just for one piece of property or two. But the way I looked at it was from the bottom up. Well, what acreage makes sense? If I had 100 acres, would I want to use this tool? If I had 200, would I want to use this? So I just looked at it from critical mass.
And I'm
rather
super
than-
offended, and by offended I mean I'm not at all. I think it's really just a matter of opinion, and I'm not.
No, that's fine. I'm just
not gonna
giving you
saturate
my rationale was looking at 100 acres, basically, the one field that's getting developed behind my place now, the Teton thing, is 150. And I could see it being applied there, to good effect. So the planning commission recommended 200. I'm sure they had that deliberation, that kind of discussion. I'm okay.
Sherry,
with
what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm okay with 200.
Okay. So we have had a council member leave us. If we do.
I'm about to, so go fast.
If we do take this, he won't be able to vote if we don't wait for him. So I'm happy to take a motion, but just keeping in mind that would be excluding one of our council members from voting.
Can I give you this to read then, Jim? So it'd be this, reducing the requirement to 200, and then this language.
Will you read the language out loud? So I
Yes, I'll read it and someone can make the.
Yeah.
A motion to approve ordinance number 2021-15, amending Title 10 of the Harriman City Code to include Chapter 33 regarding the large master plan community tool, with the threshold requirement being reduced to 200 contiguous acres, and the effective date of the ordinance taking effect upon the council's adoption of a subsequent policy. So the effective date would not be today, it would be upon adoption of a of a policy.
It's too vague for me, Chase, just what does it mean that, I just want that subsequent policy, you have to state what the subsequent policy, what does that mean? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's too vague for me. Subsequent MDA policy?
The other, yeah.
Because we could say any
That's
policy.
what we're saying, is we want an MDA policy, right? That's
Can
what
I,
we're referring to.
this is Clint.
Go ahead, Clint.
I don't have a paper in front of me, but I'm gonna at least try and take a stab to say I will make a motion on that to include that the subsequent policy addresses the critical items needed to be included in an MDA agreement brought before the city council for improvement for the protection of the city.
Are you think that's sufficient, Shane?
An MDA policy.
Do you have an opinion?
One, I'm not sure, when does this ordinance take effect?
That's the question.
Well, so
If we word it that way, is it effective?
it's effective upon the adoption of a subsequent MDA policy. You could alternatively make a motion stating that it takes effect today with the condition that the city not accept any applications until a subsequent policy is adopted.
I'm having a hard time why this is being
Would-
such a struggle on that.
Yeah, I'm wondering if a different alternative would be to just set it, move it to be effective on a date certain and give us 60 days or something out. Meaning it would be approved, but it would not come into effect. That would give us time to bring forward a policy. Because the MDA, my understanding is the MDA policy is bigger than this ordinance. It's all, you want it on all MDAs. This is just one tool that might use an MDA.
Right.
The other, kind of play devil's advocate on that, I don't know if anybody's knocking down our doors to do this at the moment.
And that's a fair point, is we already have drafted a large portion of a development agreement for a development that would likely use this tool, right? So any policy that we might adopt retroactively might.
But making it effective on a certain date in the future that gives us a set time period to take care of that. You can just say it, Olympia Hills, their petition, we can still say, yeah,
It's on the agenda.
we
right?
still,
This is
we
what's
still
coming.
will agree to their petition, right? It's just a petition that says, will you consider us, right? But wording it the way Nathan just said, says we will not take an application to use this tool until it is finalized on that date. So they can still do all that work, it doesn't affect all of that, but they can't try to use that tool until we have that in place,
Yeah,
right?
and we're not going to rezone anything until we actually made an official decision to bring them into the
Right.
city. It doesn't matter, 60 days, whatever, it's not going to affect that.
Does that kind of covers Steve's concern of, does that affect that item?
Yeah, that's
right,
really,
their
I mean, that's
petition?
really, I don't want to, let's
But-
not monkey it up too much if it's not,
We
it's not big
can still
enough.
approve the petition, it's just a
Yeah.
petition that says, will you consider us to come into the city, right? That's all it is, that's all we're agreeing to is consider it. Everything else that we've been talking about is still to come, right? And by saying that you can't use this tool until we finalize that piece of it, says, even if we were to approve their annexation, everything got done, they still couldn't use this until we got that piece.
There's,
But they
there's
can
one
consider
aspect.
use of it or
Right.
anything, they can plan
Right.
based
There
on
is one aspect
assumptions.
of this, though, that there's one aspect of this we got to talk about, too. MDAs are negotiated documents, right? And so we can list, here's the things that it must have, but what if somebody says, I want to take off item number 4, but in exchange for that, I'll do X, Y, and
Well,
Z,
as
right?
a policy, that allows us to do it.
So I guess I'm just thinking out loud. The policy doesn't necessarily bind any outcome. It just says an MDA, a basic MDA needs to include these things. And then we still have the freedom and flexibility to negotiate any, I don't know that we would be highly motivated to go against their policy, but
But it says the
there's a
baseline.
possibility that say, okay, well, it says you can't do this. Okay, well, we would like to do that, but we'll do this instead, or something like that, right?
That's a good point, and I guess that's why I paused with the difference between including those specific things in the zone.
Right.
Right, so that you can't monkey around with it. I like that finality better. But at this, to play devil's advocate on the other side, maybe there's something unforeseen that's, for some reason, we would want to let them put a school in and keep all of the density, and they're going to give us some, I don't know, magic unicorn that makes it worth it.
Right.
If that's the case, having that policy makes us discuss it in this fashion, and you got to explain, I have to explain why I would allow them to do that to the public.
Yeah, I agree. That it.
But at least
it
that's a
outlines,
starting point,
here's
because
our
we
normal
don't have.
expectations, and anything that isn't this is an exception, and these are the reasons for that exception and why we're contemplating it and discussing it, right?
And is that part of this tool or part of just the MDA policy?
Part of an overall MDA policy. But I think we want that to be applied to this tool. That's what we're saying. So we want a policy, and we want the policy to be applied in this tool. Yeah, I know. I tried too.
Any policy is amendable, but we could also put in there that any changes from that are at the discretion of the council. The reality is, it's always at the
It's always
discretion
at the
of the
discretion.
council. We just spell that out.
Or any future council.
Yeah, they can always change it.
I mean, they changed the ordinance. I mean,
Right,
that's-
exactly.
Correct.
I guess my intent here is that it feels like we have a very strong reputation of getting burned by our MDAs. And we have to somehow put some sort of official policy together that's going to say, here's our framework, here's our structure. And most of the time, in my opinion, it's because we just get tossed these MDAs, and I shouldn't say that so flippantly, but these are drafted by a developer's attorney who has the developer's best interest at heart, which is completely understandable. But it just feels like if we shifted that and they are drafted, or there's specific language that says this is what the city is going to expect and require in these MDAs, so that we don't miss that or lose out on those kinds of things. I just think it's important to have something official there. And I do believe that I like that it would be tied to a zone, this type of a big zone that says you have to take into account our policy on an MDA when you're considering having this not overlay zone, but this new zone applied. That I just feel like there needs to be some protection for the city built into some official policy.
I think they build on each other. If I'm just clarifying thought here is that we want to create a policy that applies to all MDAs for everybody in the city, whatever zone they're in, whatever project they're doing. If they want an MDA, we want it to conform to these basic tenets. In addition, we want to include that policy specifically as a part of this ordinance, that it doesn't just say an MDA submitted, but that the city's MDA policy is the basis for any MDA submitted, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That,
This policy
Everybody
would
agrees
not
with that?
prevent annexation, correct? Because currently the time issue is the annexation, correct?
So an annexation has to come in with an underlying zone.
Right.
It's my understanding that the developer intended to use this tool if it was passed.
Absolutely.
To have an underlying zone in place using this tool, potentially for approval by the city council on the same night
As the
that an annexation petition would be considered.
What
So, and they would fall in subsequent order such that
Not a petition, an application.
The actual itself.
correct.
There's a
Yes.
tentative
The
date.
application would be before
What
you
is that?
for approval.
What is that tentative date?
Because
that
it
we
is
expect
required
that
to go through the planning commission as well.
What is the tentative date that we expect that
It would be,
approval come through?
it could be as soon as the end of September.
Okay, so if we went forward with this, how many meetings do we have in August? Do we have 2 meetings in August?
Yes.
Okay, what's the date of the last meeting in August?
28th?
Is that
20,
So,
11th and
August
14th,
31st.
25th.
5th.
So if we came in and said, this is approved, so if we approved this with the language saying that it will take effect as of August 31st, that would mean it would give time, we get 2 meetings for staff to create a policy, get our input, let us work on it, but then also goes into effect in time that when we have to approve the annexation, it would be in place so that we'd be signaling to the developer that we intend to allow them to use this, and this is where we're going with this, but without causing any delays in the process. Does that sound correct?
I don't know that that would give you sufficient time if the end of September was your deadline, because it does require a planning commission public hearing, because it is potentially a rezone.
Well, we can do it earlier, right? We just
Could make the effective date earlier.
We could
Will
make
it be difficult to put that
on the next
policy
meeting?
together with
No,
those bullet
no, it
points?
wouldn't be. I mean, we could have it by the
11th?
we could have it by the next meeting.
So that's the 11th?
Yeah.
So effective
Make it more
Yeah,
the
difficult.
11th?
we could have it by the next meeting.
Okay, so effective the 11th, that would allow time for it to be effective, but also allow us to approve and signal that we're going through this process, start the dates that we are required to do through the petition, still meet all our deadlines for the end of the year.
I just heard Nathan whisper, that's absolutely no problem at all.
If it's your priority, we'll get it done.
We'll get it done.
The only thing that I'll throw out there, and this is not very popular, but I want to make sure that we are making good policy and we're making good decisions, not rushing a policy based on a potential use of that policy. So I would just be hesitant. I'm throwing that out there because this whole discussion's been said, oh, well, we want to hurry and get this done so Olympia can use this tool. And it's like, just make sure that we're saying that we want to be timely in our process, but I always want to be cautious in that we're not just doing this so we can hurry and make sure we're hitting all the goals and the timelines so that they can hit their January 1st annexation into the city.
Let me clarify something. I'm not suggesting that we need to rush it in order to do that. I'm just asking that those potential timelines be considered.
And I agree with that.
I think there's a difference.
Yeah, I agree with that, but when I hear that we have it on for action, it's always on for potential action, and that's a big difference. So we always have to remember that this is on for potential action as long as we believe that it's been vetted out well and it's hitting the right policy.
And I think that's fair and valid. And like I even just said earlier in regards to the acreage, like I think that we make decisions based on what's right, not the specific application that we're so.
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
completely agree with that, Sherry. I think that's valid, and I appreciate you pointing that out. From what I hear, it sounds like the motion that may possibly be coming to this body here in just a moment will be something along the lines of approving it with an effective date of August 11th, and then also on the condition that staff brings us a MDA policy for review and possible action on the same night.
And can I throw this in just as a question? Then if that's what we're going to do, why wouldn't we just table it and motion to approve it all at the same time? Wouldn't that be exactly the same thing?
Easy way to do it.
You could also do that.
But does that start pushing back timelines based on accepting the annexation?
I don't think so.
No,
it wouldn't
doesn't affect
It doesn't affect
It
it.
does not affect it?
They want to have the tool for the application. And this is just a petition. So am I safe to move that we continue this item to?
Rather than trying to figure out all this language. why
next
don't we
meeting.
just-
And I was just going to say, rather than tabling it, I would just continue it procedurally.
I mean that
Yeah,
continue.
continue.
So Clint, do you have a
Mr.
comment
Mayor,
there? Yeah. Go ahead, Clint.
I actually have a motion that's still on the floor.
Yes, you did make the motion. You're absolutely right. Thank you for clarifying that. Can we restate that motion real quick just so that we remember what we're talking about?
Well, what I'm hearing now, my motion was to approve the ordinance and bring back the policy at the next meeting for discussion of potential action.
So procedurally, do I need to offer a substitute motion?
So procedurally, we're getting real.
What do we need to do?
We're getting real.
Nobody had seconded that motion.
Yeah, if it dies for a second, or someone can make a motion to amend it.
Yes, those are the two options that I have at this point. So I did accept a motion. So now the question is, would somebody like to second that motion or amend said motion? I would like to, I will take my privilege as a member of this council and second the motion in regard to Clint's motion. So we do have a motion and a second in regards to approval and bringing back a policy. Is there any further discussion on that particular motion? Okay, if there's no further discussion, I will accept a vote on that motion, and that is specifically this motion. Sherry?
No.
Steve?
No.
Clint?
Yes.
Jared?
No.
I will vote yes, that motion does fail. So at that point, we are back to square one, which we can accept a new motion.
I'll make a motion to continue this discussion, this consideration of 11.3 to our next council meeting on August 11th.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Are there any further discussion on that motion? Okay, Steve?
Yes.
Clint?
No.
Jared?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
And I'll vote no. I think you guys already know why I'm voting no on that one. So that motion, however, does pass. So that will be continued to the next meeting. So we will move on then to item 11.4, discussion and consideration of an ordinance adopting the active transportation plan. Bryce, I know you're around here somewhere. I saw you hanging out.
That's all right. I'll give them to you later.
Chase, do you have the clicker?
Oh, yeah, here you go.
So similar to what Chase discussed, this presentation has been presented in the last work meeting. So the information is pretty much identical. Some key points that came out of that meeting, though, is we did add one project to the draft plan. So there has been a change in the project list, and that's a sidewalk on Main Street. So we'll kind of get to that. But since the work meeting, this has been taken to the Planning Commission, and it was recommended for approval to council. And so I'll go through this pretty quickly because we already have been through this, but our active transportation plan is a master plan for modes of travel other than motorized vehicles. So bicycles, horseback riding, walking, jogging, scooters, these are all kind of forms of active transportation that we are creating a master plan for. And so we had a combination of consultants on our team. They helped us kind of form the plan together, put this into a draft form for kind of a final presentation for adoption. And so we had consultants from WCG and also Kimley Horn that helped us put this together. And some of them you saw in the work meeting. Jeremy was there. And then Jordan King from Kimley Horn was our public outreach specialist from Kimley Horn. And so as part of that public outreach, there was a survey, a big outreach. Jordan went out to grocery stores and even got permission to set up tables to kind of talk to people and chase them down as they went into Winco and Smith's. He also met with the schools, and the schools were able to send out the survey. We also posted signs on the trails that had a QR code so that individuals could scan the QR code and bring up the survey. And so we got very good participation from that survey and kind of gave us direction in forming the plan. Like it says, 401 survey responses. And then we held a virtual open house meeting to discuss the plan that eventually received over 1,000 views. So not all those were live, obviously, but since it's been on Facebook and YouTube on our pages, the view counts, you can kind of see there, shows over 1,000 views of the meeting. And those could be repeated views, but it shows good participation, right? So some of the biggest takeaways from the survey results were that trails were very much supported by the public. We wanted to see more trails, more areas for recreation, but also to get to destinations. And then when it came to bike lanes, the general public preferred buffered bike lanes like we see on Main Street, kind of the new section of Main Street, as opposed to standard bike lanes or even a protected bike lane with like a curb in the road. That was actually less preferred than the buffered bike lanes, which are the painted lines, essentially. So here's our overall project list. So like I said, this is identical to what you saw in the work meeting, except for one change, and that is a sidewalk project on Harriman Main Street or Harriman Highway from 6400 West to 7300 West. And we can zoom in
on the sidewalk projects. I think it's one of the last slides. But any questions or comments up to that point? So here is our bicycle facilities. So like we discussed, buffered bike lanes were preferred, so we tried to fit those in as best as we could into the plan. And then where we didn't have the right-of-way or the space to accommodate for buffered bike lanes, we did show standard bike lanes that have the kind of 4-foot shoulder area as a bike lane, designated as a bike lane. And then there were just a few connections, as discussed, that we actually didn't have room even for a standard bike lane, but we needed the connection, and that's on the U Road around City Hall, and then on Brundisi, that's kind of the outer U Road. Those will show as shared bike lane, shared lanes. So you may have seen these in other cities where they just have the bike symbol and arrows on top of it. It just essentially means a bike can take up the lane if they want to, and to keep an eye for cyclists. And that was essential just to make that connection, as you can see, from Fort Harriman Parkway to Main Street. And then paved paths, we looked at the creeks and got some feedback from Planning Commission to add in some paths from Town Center up to our existing trail systems at Midas Creek and Copper Creek. And so we made those connections as best we could. And then they looked at the pedestrian improvements, specifically at where pedestrians need to cross, and looked at improvements. So this is a little bit vague on what the intersections improvements, but these are kind of areas of concern that we can look at and target for whether it's pedestrians crossing, or if it's cyclists at an intersection that they don't know kind of where to be placed. These are kind of our priority list on those. And then here's our proposed sidewalks. So you'll see that, that addition on the sidewalk on Harriman Highway. And I said 6400 west, but we actually show it from about 6200 west. That's where the sidewalk ends now.
I think what you said was the change in from what you previously had planned. There was a little bit that was there. We just didn't connect the entire amount. So the change just includes that entire portion.
Yeah. So that just gets kind of sidewalk all the way from essentially City Hall all the way out to the future school and to 7300 west. And then that's the draft plan. I can answer any questions before you kind of consider that for adoption.
Are there any questions? If there are no questions, I'll accept the motion.
Make a motion to approve ordinance number 2021-16, adopting and approving an active transportation master plan.
Second.
Motion is second. Jared?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
I will vote yes, that motion passes. We will move on to item 11.5, discussion and consideration of a resolution accepting a petition for annexation filed by Olympia Land LLC and Last Holdout LLC for further consideration. Jackie?
Mayor and Council, on June 15th, we did receive a petition for annexation from Olympia Land LLC. Jonathan did bring up a map of what is being proposed. All of the noticing by the county was mailed out, and we're just going through the process to consider this to ensure that it is meets all of the requirement from state statute. If you guys do approve for us to consider this petition further, we would set up public hearings, go through the noticing process for that, and the protest period.
So this is literally just the beginning of the process.
It's the beginning, just saying, yes, you would
we
consider.
are officially going to consider it.
We would consider it, and we want it to go through the process.
Okay. And there's no approval right now. We're not approving it as an annexation to the city. All we're doing is saying we're going to look at it.
That is correct.
They're not asking for anything specific in this petition, just will you consider bringing this land into the city?
That is correct.
Fantastic. Is there any questions to our recorder regarding this?
No, but I would ask Chase just to clarify, just for the public consumption, that even if we do not, if we didn't take this action tonight, by not taking action, it officially says we're taking action. Will you clarify that?
Yes, if the city council, by state statute, if the city council fails to take any action, either accept or deny, at the next city council meeting after the petition is made, it's automatically accepted. So it's simply just coming before you now to
So we
take an
either-
action.
What if we said no?
If you say no, they start over from square one. Right.
And they just write another letter and send it to the county?
They can do that, yes.
The only reason I asked that is just to point out that
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
petition itself is, that's all this is will you consider this land into the city and start the process where we actually talk about it?
And Jackie touched on it, the Reader's Digest version is, if you do accept it tonight, what would happen is Jackie would work with the county to certify that what they have included in their petition is actually eligible for annexation.
Nice.
And she would have to certify that everything is correct, and that certification would then come back to the city council. It would trigger, like Jackie said, public hearing deadlines, also a protest period where the public can lodge their comments, and then a public hearing would be held after a certain period of time, 30 days. And again, it's just the kicking off of the procedure.
Thanks. I just wanted to be redundantly clear on this. Thank
So
you.
there's 2 dates that any property can be annexed into the city, and those dates are January 1 and July 1. And there are state statute deadlines for those to hit either one. But just because we have a petition filed right now doesn't mean that it's going to hit one or the other. It depends on how the process progresses.
Right.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Any further questions or discussions by this body?
No, just the comment is, I appreciate the opportunity to move the petition from theoretical discussions into a formal process that gets the public, noticed and involved and, making points. So I'm glad to move this forward.
If there's no further discussion or questions, I'm happy to accept a motion.
Motion to approve Resolution R18-2021, accepting a petition for annexation filed by Olympia Land LLC for further consideration and related matters.
I will second.
I have a motion and a second. Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
And I will vote yes, that motion passes. We will move on to our last main item for today in our general meeting, which is discussion and consideration of a resolution agreeing to the creation of a peninsula caused by the Olympia annexation. Jackie?
So in this annexation area, Olympia Land LLC had opted to leave out a portion of land that is owned by Rocky Mountain Power. And you can see it in this image, and it just creates a peninsula that stays within the unincorporated portion of Salt Lake County. State statute requires that if a peninsula is created, both the city and the county have to agree to the creation of that peninsula. I know that the petition sponsor for this reached out to the county to see if they could include it so they don't have to do this step. They'd informed them that they would have to start the process over, so they are asking for the council to consider the creation of this peninsula to maintain this petition.
What is the size of that peninsula? I mean, it looks like it's, 300 feet long?
It's 2 acres.
It's
Exactly 2 acres.
It's exactly 2 acres of land at the very edge of the thing owned by a third party.
And yeah, it's owned by Questar, excuse me.
Questar Gas.
Yes.
So does it change it from 933 to 931?
No.
Total acreage?
No, the acreage still stays the same in the annexation.
Okay.
It would have, if this area was included in it, it would increase it by 2
It's
acres.
unfortunate that the foresight wasn't there to include it, because that would have been much simpler, it seems.
Yeah, I think that what they were wanting to do was just not require to get a signature from Questar. It was just
It
more
sounds like-
semantics. It wasn't anything.
Got ya.
Go ahead, Steve, Clint.
I was just gonna ask, I mean, obviously, I think, know the answer to it, but when it comes to the creation of a peninsula, there's no size
limit.
requirement that negates that. I mean, we're only talking 2 acres in this, but because it's still a 2 acre peninsula, then we still have to take this step, obviously.
That is correct.
Yeah. Okay.
My understanding of the reason for this is that we have islands and peninsulas in service district areas that create huge service problems, right? So,
Yes.
I mean, it is a technicality, but that's why.
And I might look at Chase, or Jackie, if you know the answer, what would happen if the county does not agree to this?
Then they would actually have to start the whole process over. To include that out or carve out a portion of their annexation area.
Okay. Any further questions or discussion? I'll accept a motion.
Motion to approve Resolution R19-2021, agreeing to the creation of a peninsula caused by the Olympia annexation.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second by Sherry. Jared?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
I'll vote yes, that motion passes. That brings us to the end of our general meeting. Please be aware that we do have a truth in taxation meeting. That, once again, is for the changes in the taxing percentages that we are making for the city. That will be held on August 4th at 6 p.m. That taxation item will be the only item on that agenda. The next day, we have a planning commission meeting at 7 p.m. August 11th is our next city council work meeting at 5 p.m. and general meeting at 7 p.m. Please be aware also that Newsies will continue at the from the Harriman Arts Council and through the 19th. We also do every week have the Harriman food truck roundup. We also have a Meet the Candidates night coming up on Tuesday, the 20th at 6 p.m. here at Harriman City Hall. I encourage all residents to tune in or listen. And if you have questions, please feel free to submit those to the city that they may possibly be asked of the candidates. We will have Pioneer Day observance on July 23rd. So that's the day the city offices will be closed. We also have farmers markets that are occurring at 5 p.m. on Mondays at Crane Park here at Harriman City Hall. With that, I will accept a motion to move back into work meeting and go from there.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.